This is January 29, 2018. It's 4:30 p.m. in the Thomas J. Smith Council Chambers, so we welcome everybody tonight and those that are watching by TV. We're going to roll right downhill tonight. Starting number one, we have a resolution approving sale of property locally known as 424 North 3rd Street, City of Burlington, Iowa, with conditions continued from the January 15, 2018 City Council meeting. Mr. Tisland?
I think they're still working through their numbers and still planning to come forward on next Monday. So I guess we'll see what happens at that point.
Okay. Number two is resolution approving an agreement between the City of Burlington, Iowa.
Yes.
Just waiting for you to sit down, Jim.
Why?
I was just trying to be courteous.
Well, that's nice. I don't think I want to
Number
sit
two is a
down.
resolution approving an agreement between the City of Burlington, Iowa and Alliant Energy Incorporated for all-night lighting service on South 10th Street. Mr. McGregor?
Good evening.
This one isn't.
In front of you is a resolution approving a street light on South 10th. I'll get a map put up there.
If Stephanie change over to the projectors.
So the current situation at this house, you see a blue line with some red dots. That would need to be a new installation of power lines running down the street side to be able to install the street light as requested. That charge would be $2,056 to the City of Burlington, and then a $6.86 charge per month. The reason why it's on the regular agenda is that I do not recommend approval of this streetlight installation.
Say that again, sir.
I do not recommend approval. After talking with the police department, they observed the area at night and said that the darkness or the lack of light there is not enough concern in that area to recommend approval of it. So, given the cost that we would incur to install this, I do not recommend approval.
Council, questions?
Normally on your maps, I was looking at that earlier, normally on your maps, you put the yellow dots where there's existing lights.
Correct.
I didn't see any.
There is, yeah, I stole this from Alliant.
Okay.
Alliant put this together as
So it
to
must
what
be-
they would have to do to install new,
Oh, I see.
a new line. There is one on the corner of, not the corner, but the T intersection of Park
Okay,
and South 10th.
okay, right there.
Yep.
All right.
There is lights on the corners. I should have redone the map myself
that's
to
all
have to
No,
show where
I
the lights
looked on
were.
it, and normally you do, that's why I was
Yeah.
asking the question, so.
On number two, he's not recommending, just to catch you up. And the cost is $2,056. Okay, you guys good?
Good.
Thank you, sir.
Good with my questions.
Okay, number three, resolution awarding bid of the 2017 Law Enforcement Center site work improvements. Big chief.
That's a placeholder. The bids will come back in tomorrow. I think it's tomorrow on the 30th that they're due the sealed bid, so I don't have any updates for you till we open those. It's just a placeholder.
You guys good?
Yep, good.
The proposed consent agenda, resolution approving, number one, resolution approving engagement letter with Piper Jaffray and Company to serve as underwriter for issuance of $8,370,000 general obligation corporate purpose bonds, Series 2018A capital improvements projects for FY 2018 to 2019.
We'll have, Travis will be here in a little while. Last I talked to him, I got off the phone, he was around Eddyville. That was about an hour, or half an hour ago, so
So we'll see him at the end of the meeting.
we'll see him before the end of the meeting. He'll give a presentation on the GO bonds.
Okay. Number two is a resolution awarding contract for the Flint River Trail Phase 1 South A Trail project. Mr. Tisland?
This is a continuation of the project that occurred last fall. We had some excess funds remaining available for this project, grant funds. We did submit this for bid on December 21st, 2017, received bids ranging from $194,000 up to $221,000. We do recommend going with the low bid of $194,777 from Jones Contracting Corp. of West Point. We do have $255,804 remaining from REAP funds to cover this cost. So we may be able to, I guess, add a little bit at the end of this project as well. But the more we do now, hopefully the less we have to do down the road. And since we have these funds secured, we want to use them before they have to be turned back into the state. So he would anticipate starting early spring on this project.
Council, questions? Okay, then. Number 3 is a resolution approving permanent and temporary easements with Iowa International Investments, Inc. along Bluff Road for construction of the Flint River Trail. Mr. Tilson?
So there's 2 sections of easements, I should have mentioned that earlier, with this project. They're pretty narrow easements. The large yellow portions on this map are the temporary construction easements. There's some hillside here that there'll be some grading work too. There is a very small portion, you can see the darker, very dark portion there, just kind of a sliver. That's the only permanent easement. Just as we get through there, the right-of-way gets narrow. This is with Iowa International Investments, Inc. Andrew Hoth has reviewed this and agreed to this easement. We are still working with Lamont Company further north. We did stop the project short of their driveway. If we're able to get an easement to cross their driveway or work with them on that, then we'd have a larger easement there. But we're still working with them on that and what we can accomplish this year with that. So there should be another easement coming up here in the next month or so.
Hope so. Questions?
So where that tapers, that's where the driveway is?
The driveway's actually further up. There's no driveway here with, I'll show you on this map here. So this easement's with International Investments, just in
Yeah.
the center of the trail. The one we're working with Lamont will be further up, just towards the beginning of the driveway. So we're stopping short right now, but if we're able to work with them and get easement to cross over their driveway, do some improvements there, then we'll try and do that with the excess funds. But we do need just a small, I think it's a 4-foot wide easement at the end of that portion.
Okay, thank you.
You good?
Yep.
Okay. Next, we have a resolution approving temporary and permanent easements with Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroad for work on Mount Pleasant Street Bridge project. Mr. Mack.
This resolution is a kind of a continuation from the previous meeting that we had where we had the BNSF rail agreement. Contained within the rail agreement was the easements that you now see before you. After some long conversation with BNSF on the value of the easements, we have a separate resolution approving different easement prices than what we initially had talked about. So the total price is $4,410 for temporary and permanent easement, and then $2,000 for an administrative fee. So $6,400 to obtain these easements. Once we have approval on this, we'll be able to get moving forward and submit. Because of this timeline, we are now looking at a May letting schedule for the Mount Pleasant Street Bridge.
You guys good? Okay, next we have a resolution approving professional service agreement with ISG for design of the former Greer's Restaurant.
This resolution would approve a design contract with ISG, their design firm out of Des Moines, to do the design work, architectural, and some civil work for the former Greer's Restaurant. I have had a conversation with a couple of different firms, one local, one within reach of here, but this was the best price. I have a limited budget to work with, $180,000 remaining to do the white boxing work at Greer's. So it is my recommendation to go forward with ISG to do the work.
Questions?
Is that enough to get everything done that we had planned to get done?
I hope so. It's a finite budget, so it's, I don't like walking into a project with a finite budget like this, but.
You like an infinite budget, Nick?
Well, that's not what I mean, but
I'm just messing with you.
Well, he would. And
Well,
truth be
yeah.
known,
I wasn't talking to you, Jim. All right. You guys good? Jim's gonna beat me up before this
He
meeting's
is.
out.
Actually, and Nick has I don't know whether we will be applying, but there's a potential to apply for another grant source to piggyback off of this project for I think it's another 10 to 15,000 potentially that we could.
Correct.
maybe add on.
I should maybe expand. The challenge grant that was received is $75,000. Also discussed finishing the floor in the great room that is currently not as good a status as it could be. There's a section that we had tested with the great room project. Royal Concrete came down and did a pretty good job. And so we'd like to do that for the rest of the floor. That comes with a fairly hefty price tag of about $30,000. So we paired this with the work that we're going to do at Greer's for the grant application. And the grant application talked about doing this work as well. It would be nice to go after some more money to be able to secure that work on top of the rest of the work for Greer's. When you're doing a renovation project like that, you can walk into some change orders that get in the $10,000 to $15,000 range pretty quick, and when you only have $180,000 to
Right
work
on.
with on doing that, we will probably be trying to apply for that. But we'll get design started now, and I think there's probably a construction. As soon as you start construction, you're no longer eligible for the grant, but I haven't read the details of that grant, so.
Yeah, I think it has a March or April timeline to apply and the funding award after July 1.
Design will take several months to do, so we have a little bit of time to work on that application.
Excuse me, you guys good?
I'm good.
Okay. We have public hearings. First, consideration of plans and specs for 2018 north half of Tama Building Permeable Alley Project for February 20th. B is consideration of an application for CDBG pilot program upper story rental rehab program funds through IEADA, February 20th. C is a consideration of $8,370,000 general obligation corporate purpose bonds, Series 2018 capital improvement projects for 2018 to 2019 budget for loans agreements, and urban renewal plan amendment, that'll be March 5th, 2018. And D is a consideration of urban renewal plan amendment, March 5th, 2018. Anybody got anything they want?
What I do want to mention on these, Travis, when he comes, will can give a little bit of background for the engagement letter that's required as a resolution earlier, as well as what'll go on with the public hearing.
Right on.
And I don't know how much he'll really hit on the urban renewal plan, but it's associated with it. That's more documentation that we're getting from Bob Jostin, the attorney in Des Moines, who kind of makes sure that we cover it. But for to do any borrowings on projects and get them attached to TIF to be TIF eligible, we have to amend our urban renewal plan. So we have 3 projects that we're looking to add to that. That's the adaptive signalization. You gotta help me with what else?
The bridge.
Mount Pleasant Street Bridge, and you have a third one. Was that in this one too?
Broadway
That
extension.
was,
Broadway extension was the
yeah.
one, the Rise Match. Those are the 3 projects specifically out of the FY 19 and 20 CIP plan projects that we're looking to get to be where they're eligible for TIF financing. And I would assume that you'd want to go through the discussion items and just hit Travis, work him in where you want to,
okay.
when he does after he gets here.
We'll make sure he covers it all, my friend. Okay, let's go to discussion items. The first is treasurer's report. Net, class of 87, come on down.
Okay, in the packet was December's treasurer's report. As you can see, everything looks good. We've done our transfers, so everything's kind of back in balance and nothing unusual happening. The same things that have been going on, like timing issues with property maintenance and vehicle maintenance, just the normal. So, I don't know, there's a few projects, big projects that we got going on, and those are timing. We're doing draws, or we will be bonding, and bond proceeds will pay down some of those. Other than that, I don't know if there's anything, Jim, that you want to point out.
One thing, the special projects under hotel motel is a deficit, and I can't remember if that's the one, but I think it's the one that we're looking to have end the year as a deficit account too, out of the the subset of the hotel motel tax. Hotel motel tax as a whole will still have the 130 to 150,000
Correct.
balance when we end the year, but that one's gonna be, I think, a deficit account, and we're just not able to do any projects next year, and I think we may even end next year with a small deficit, but it then gets back into the positives. But the overall hotel motel account will still
Be
throughout
positive.
be carrying a $130,000 balance. But it's just a spot where having our money go down, that's the area where we see the biggest impact of what we can do for projects.
Hey, make that money go back up for us, okay?
Sure,
guys have
Shane.
Appreciate it. Class of 87. Any other, you guys good with an ad or questions?
I believe so.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Good, thanks.
Okay. Number 2, airport year-end report and budget. Mary Beard, come on down.
Good afternoon. My name is Mary Beard with the Southeast Iowa Regional Airport. So I'm here tonight to present our annual budget and just an annual update of what's going on at the airport. I believe this information was also put in your packet, but we'll put it up on the screen so everyone can see it. First thing I'd like to review is the general aviation destinations. This map shows general aviation, so that's your corporate air traffic, or your corporate aircraft, private aircraft, of people who fly in and out of Burlington. So we're the red dot, and then you can see that we've got some traffic that goes all the way to Florida, up to the northeast corner, Arizona. So the airport's used by a lot of folks in the general aviation world. Below that is our monthly operations. So we have actually a 5% increase in operations over 2017. So what that means is general aviation landings and takeoffs. So every time corporate traffic, just a private pilot, those folks land and take off at the airport. So we had 1,254 of those. Commercial operations, so that's Air Choice One, landing and taking off daily. They had 3,142 operations last year, so that was an increase of 5% increase over 2016. I think we can contribute that increase to Air Choice One. They added flights to Minneapolis last year, and then also as a daily flight Monday through Friday. And then November, December, they actually added 2 flights to Chicago. So Air Choice One is really being a great partner with us and trying to get our employment numbers up. They're doing everything they can, so that's good news there.
Were they looking to add another destination, or is Minneapolis the new one? that is?
Minneapolis is, we could also consider Mason City, because actually the flight leaves Burlington, Mason City, and then goes on to Minneapolis and back. So that's all we know on the radar for right now. The USDOT awarded Air Choice One a 4-year contract to serve Burlington through 2022. The same schedule as they've had, 2 daily flights to Chicago and St. Louis, a weekday flight to Minneapolis, St. Paul, and then they added the weekend flights to Chicago. Air Choice One's looking at adding some different aircraft to their fleet, so it's a 1,900 aircraft Beechcraft, holds 19 passengers. That's potential for more passengers in and out of the airport. So in 2017, we had a total of 14,898 passengers served. That is in and out. That was a 14% increase over 2016. So that's really good news for us. First number, employments. It says 7,659 employments. That's the number that we always look at. If we can reach 10,000 employments, that means a lot more federal funds for the airport.
A whole lot more federal funds?
That would be $1 million a year. So currently, we receive $150,000. So what that $1 million would do is runway projects, any infrastructure needs. It's not, wouldn't help our operating. So that's our striving point for 10,000 employments. Essential Air Services, Air Choice One, and that bill, we're looking pretty good as far as what's going on with the legislative right now with the Essential Air Service. The bill has been extended through March 31st of 2018. They are tightening the eligibility requirements for that program, so that would mean, they're looking at this per passenger subsidy cap. For any airport that's in this program that their per passenger subsidy cap is above $200 per passenger, they're looking to have those airports removed. That's not us, we're at 177. We've been well below that 200 for several years now, so that looks great for us as well to continue that service. In 2017, the projects that were completed at the airport annually, the Iowa DOT provides some funding so that we can do marketing for Air Choice One. So that's really just marketing that air service to try to get our 10,000 employments. That's a great help for our marketing budget. We did complete a corporate hangar. That was a $262,000 grant from the Iowa DOT. Upgraded some ramp lighting and a airfield regulator along with the airport beacon. So the total projects in 2017 was $347,000 from the state of Iowa, with our match being $14,500. It's a pretty good investment, I think, return on investment for airport improvements. In 2018, projects slated for Iowa DOT money is, again, they've awarded us the $35,000 to do some marketing. And then we're going to be looking at a little bit of a terminal remodel, phase 1. So total state projects for 2018 is $166,000 there. Federal projects, we in March, we'll start doing an apron rehabilitation. That's $1 million project, awarded to Myers Construction in Sperry. And then we're doing the design phase of runway 1836 reconstruction rehabilitation project. That is the big project that we've been talking about with everyone here for the last 3 or 4 years, so we can talk a little bit more about that in the future here. 2018 federal projects for a total of $1.1 million. Again, our match there is $115,000. So the contributions that the city makes to the airport, that's where that money's coming from. That's where that $115,000 is made up. Industry trends for the airport, larger aircraft, all around the Moline, the Cedar Rapids, what they're seeing is larger aircraft, less frequency. That wouldn't be a good thing, wouldn't be a good fit for us. We like the more frequency, so we're really happy with the more frequency in the smaller aircraft. There's a pilot shortage still going on. We'll see that trickle down to us perhaps in the future. We haven't seen that yet, but that's a big thing looming in the industry. A&P mechanic shortages, it's hard to find folks to work on the aircraft, and fewer general aviation pilots. So the general aviation pilots are aging out, retiring, not continuing to fly. Not a lot of young people who are interested in aviation right now. So a few of the industry trends. Operating budget for fiscal year 18-19. We just had a total increase of about 2% for our fiscal year. And then the estimated contributions from Burlington, West Burlington, and Des Moines County are listed there as well. Of those total $186,000, 55% of that we use for operating, and the remaining is used for those capital contribution match dollars. Just a little more detail about our income there, the income side of things, $292,000. Expenses are at $394,000. Does show a red line there as a negative number. However, then we adjust that with the member contributions to make up for our operating budget. So that's why our budget is shown the way it is shown. And then the discussion several years ago when we started talking about runway 1836. So that's a big project coming up. Construction should start in fall of 2019, spring of 2020. We have asked for about $515,000 from the city of Burlington to help with that. That's a $10,000 project. Our match dollars is $1 million. So between the entities and the airport, we have had a discussion in 2015, and that was kind of the breakdown. And talked with Jim off and on here about when we think we'll need those funds to be available to us. We'll go out to bid on that project next spring. So that's our big project that's looming here. And then our final page here is our 5-year capital improvements. So in fiscal year 2019-2020, this Rehabilitate the Runway 1836 project is coming up. And then we're doing some terminal upgrades, that's some state funds. The year 2021, we have some airfield signage to update, a building remodel, reconstruct some taxi lanes, that's some pavement. 2021, rehabilitate taxiway C and some marketing dollars. Acquire land or have an easement, some easements maybe in 2022, 23. So total for the next 5 years, if you look at our 5-year capital plan, that's $14 million that we have budgeted. The airport's match is 1.5, the state's 590,000, and the FAA would contribute $12,233 to those projects. So it's kind of where we are with our 5-year budget, and we come back to the council every year and review this budget and talk about where it is. At this point in time, we're not asking for any additional funding other than for the big Rehabilitate 1836 project. So that is that. Just want to say I got a great board that I work for. Charlie Walsh, Dwight Mulch, John Schultz is your city representatives, and they do a great job for the airport. And I have some great city departments that I work with as well. Development, city, the parks helps us out, the streets helps us out, so it's just great. Fire department, appreciate all the help that we get.
Is the police department any help?
Police department,
I heard the chief of police is absolutely giving you no help. That's what I heard. We'll talk about it later.
well, yeah, that would be great. So, any questions? That's our annual report for the airport.
Questions?
I do. The breakdown percentage, 75, 12, and 13, is that preordained, or is that, how does that determine?
Actually, so when the Airport Authority was formed in 1996, the city of Burlington, I wasn't here, but this is how I understand that. So they are allowed to do a tax levy of 21% to 25%. So I think 21 to 25 cents. So they could tax levy that amount of money for an airport authority. And then West Burlington would do the same. So they've just come up with a flat fee that they contribute, and Des Moines County contributes a flat fee. So obviously the city of Burlington deeded all of the property over to the airport authority. And that's how it came up at the beginning.
Glad you brought that up.
The
When was the last-
percentages written into the 28E agreement, I think, as well, for how that breaks down between the different entities for.
Okay.
Is that negotiable? Is that up for negotiation? Because I thought it was.
You'd
and
have
I
to
thought it had been a
redo
while
the
since we talked
28,
to.
you'd have to redo the 28E agreement with the other entities.
What's it at right now? Is it at the 25 cents or the
21.
21? So it's on the lower end.
When was the last time how long has this one been in effect? When
I
was the last
think
time?
the 28E is, that one might be into perpetuity until you change it.
We review that every 5 years. It was fairly recent when we reviewed that.
Okay.
Yep.
I think it's been since I've been on, hasn't it? It's within the last 6 years.
Oh, yeah,
That's what I thought.
absolutely. Yep,
Okay.
yep.
I had a question, Mary.
Sure.
You said that 14,000 people were served, an increase in 14%. And then you said in order to get that additional million, we had to have 10,000.
So we call that employments.
Yeah. Explain that. I didn't quite understand
Sure,
that.
so the 10,000 employments is the number of people who get on the aircraft in Burlington.
Okay.
14,000 served. We talk about that when they're coming in and they're leaving both. So we add both of those numbers together.
I wonder if there's a way that we could make it a little cheaper to fly out of here to get those numbers up, we'll get that $1 million back.
That's what I'm thinking. I want to get that $1 million.
So you're about
We
3,000.
mean amazing at vacation more. That's what we need to do. We all
You're
need to
about three,
vacation more.
are you about 3,000 people away from meeting that then? Is that, am
We
I
are.
reading that right?
That's correct, yep.
Does Air Choice One have the ability right now to meet that? If that capacity? Do they have the capacity to see an additional 3,000?
Not currently, they would have to add flights.
Okay,
And
so
it would
there's a
be
restriction there on that
unsubsidized
course. Yeah,
flights.
yeah.
Or with the additional of the Beechcraft 1900, larger aircraft, 19 passengers versus 8 passengers.
Does that count general aviation?
No,
Okay.
no.
So really, there's not a whole lot we can do to get you there. It's more or less we're restricted by the ability or the quantity that they can take on their aircraft.
Just continue to market the service. The more
Right,
that we can
right.
show that we can get closer to that 10,000 enplanements,
Mhm.
that gives us a little more negotiating power with Air Choice One to say,
Okay.
hey, I
get
think
there.
we can do it. So, yep.
Good.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
Great.
All right, thanks.
In regards to where their numbers fit within the budget, Mary's CIP items are in our CIP book. We do have the one item for borrowing, and we've worked with Travis to make sure that we're modeling and okay with being able to cover that amount, not in this year's borrowing, but in next year's borrowing.
Did you want to just go ahead and do Travis now, or?
That's,
You gotta
if you
get out
want to
of
do,
here?
that you certainly can. We have your engagement letter, and then the borrowing amount itself, the 8 million and change. Change. It's big change.
Big change.
The 8 million's a big number, and the change is the next. That's what you're reading? So,
You have a presentation?
you have the-
No. You have your own, you have one, don't you?
Yeah. I have handouts. I put I did send it out. Got a copy of it?
Did you, were you on that? I'm sorry.
I might not have. There. That's all right. The numbers get small anyway, and they don't look at it.
You know, yeah, you take it to school and teach it. You know what I mean?
I don't think so.
I guess I got an extra.
It's really too small to really, I think, put up there.
You can zoom it in.
You can.
Thanks. Travis Squires, Piper Jaffrey in Des Moines, so great to see you. Some new faces up there on the council, so. I don't see nameplates, so I might say you, if anybody's got questions.
Well, we don't have nameplates up here?
I don't see them.
Well, introduce yourselves real quick
Yes,
to
that'd be
Travis, please, our new council members.
I'm Matt Rinker.
Okay, Matt?
I'm not new, but I'm Annie Wilson.
Yeah, I know.
I'm new, my name is Roger Willis.
Yeah. Are you gonna take his name then too?
Tom Phillips.
Linda Murray.
Linda Murray, nice to meet you,
Nice to
thanks.
meet you.
So one thing that we've done with the city over the last, I'll say 5 years, since the city went through some, I guess just a financial rebuilding plan, is to take some time at the beginning of kind of this budgetary process to talk through the CIP program, your capital improvement, and how the financing lays out for that. One of the things that I'd say one could maybe be critical of the past was just some of the city's debt structures, not thinking about, well, we solved the problem for this year, but what does that do, year 3, 4, and 5 of the budget? So what we've attempted to do is not only show your 5-year CIP and potential tax impact, but then also look at really the next 5 to 10 years, and, can the city still maintain, let's say a normal street program funded out of your debt service levy without having bumps in the levy rate going up and down, and so just some advanced planning. We're gonna talk a little bit about your tax increment financing, revenues, and then just there'll be a lot of numbers there. I don't anticipate that you're gonna digest everything, every number on every sheet of paper, so I'm kind of looking at giving you some broad overview trends. I recognize this is the first time you've seen this, so this is work session, so we're gonna work through the numbers, and ultimately, if you have additional questions, we're gonna be at meetings later this spring to talk through information in more
Can
detail.
you give an overview of what Piper Jaffrey does
Yep.
for the city too?
Yep. So Piper Jaffrey is an investment bank. We have a national footprint, actually global footprint. Our Des Moines office serves Iowa school districts, cities, community colleges, and counties throughout the state of Iowa. So my geographical reach is within the boundaries of the state of Iowa. So we drive to the border. I try not to cross the bridge over into the other, no. So I do try to, we stay in Iowa for the most part. We do have a national presence, though. We have an Illinois office and a St. Louis office and a Kansas City office and Minneapolis that serve a lot of the Midwest municipalities. So one of the things that we've done for the city is we've served as the underwriter on your bonds. So essentially what that means is that we are the entity that helps connect you with investors for purchasing your bonds and then ultimately setting the interest rate on your debt profile. So that's kind of the global scale. On the day-to-day operations, we try to maintain communication about any sort of CIP impact, give you some best practices. We've worked with the city over the last 5 years in developing your financial policies in place in order to, I wouldn't say they're solely designed for the rating agencies and, you know, what they look for, but certainly putting your city in a place where you can access the capital markets and investors at the lowest interest rates that would be available to any city within the state of Iowa. So we've helped with some best practices conversations, and then overall we just help with, I would say, kind of the financial forecasting and planning for your debt profile. You know, we do weigh in from time to time on general fund operation things as they kind of relate to bond financing. So we may talk a little bit on that, just some real high level things. But overall, I think that's what we do. Some days I have trouble explaining to my wife what I do on a day-to-day basis.
That can cause you problems.
Was that? Yeah, I know. But ultimately, you know, I think we're to be thought of as, you know, the financial consultant that helps you get through the mess of what it means to borrow from the capital markets. So we try to make that as painless as possible. You're saying painless, and you're like, this looks like 20 pages of small numbers. That doesn't look very painless. So we do have to kind of delve into the detail. We operate from a prove your math standpoint. So I'll give you high-level overview, and then you'll see that, well, our math is proven out on these worksheets. So with that being said, and Jim, you got anything to add? I hit it? Okay.
Let's do it.
So a real quick overview. You know, some of the targets that we look at in kind of setting your overall capital improvement plan. Targets, your debt limit margin, you have a policy that says that you will not exceed 70% of your debt limit. Debt limit is a function that's used in Iowa government finance to indicate the maximum amount of debt or general obligation debt paid with property taxes that you can have outstanding. In your case, you are at 63.581% currently. You have a self-imposed limitation of being at no more than 70%. Now, I'll say that that's been a bit of a transition for the city because when you adopted those policies, you were closer to 80%. So you've been slowly working down as you pay off debt, issuing less debt, new debt than what you're paying off. So getting yourself down to, I would say, a more manageable level, but something that the city felt was an important component. It gives you more flexibility. Your debt service levy, so this would be all of your debt is paid for really with a couple different resources, but the primary resource is a property tax levy that is at just shy of $3.80 per thousand of taxable valuation. So that's on all taxable property within the city, regardless of whether or not it's in a tax increment financing area, urban renewal area. All property within the city pays the debt service levy. One of the other, as I mentioned earlier, targets is we want to identify project cost and payments up front. So when you have a request that, you know, we want to do a $1 million street project or, you know, a $2 million rec project, that going into that, you know what is available within your existing constraint structure. So if we have street replacements laid out in your capital improvement levy and there's additional project on top of that, then we need to have some discussion about, does something fall off or does one of your other constraints change? For example, does it require a 5-cent levy rate increase in order to fit that within your debt profile?
No, it doesn't.
No.
But anyways, please continue.
Well, we're gonna talk about some good news as we've laid out your CIP plan. It does look at over the next 10 years, there's potential for about an 80-cent drop in that debt service levy. So I'll walk you through the math behind that as well. You know, and those are some of the goals of the administration team that we've talked about. You know, one of the big things over the last couple of years is the city has begun releasing some of what I'll call the TIF valuation, the valuation within that urban renewal area that the city was using to pay debt service. You are no longer collecting at the maximum amount, which is, this will be the second year going into fiscal 19 out of probably the last, I don't know if you've ever not, outside of the last couple of years, had the maximum amount that you could claim within the tax increment financing area. So certainly some very positive developments there. You know, that then spreads out those dollars to all the other taxing entities. The primary function of tax increment financing is to spur on development, take care of slum and blight issues that may exist in communities, and then allow your incremental valuation from economic development then to support the taxes of the other entities. So you guys are well on your way of doing that, and that's the first time you've really been able to do that. We had a lot of conversations about a year ago, and we started that process where you released about $10 million of valuation back into the general kind of tax pool. That also does help the city's general fund out in providing more dollars there. Any questions just kind of on that real quick overview? Okay, go ahead and move on. Sir, I'm just going to talk real quick about your valuation profile and then debt limit up at the top. You'll see there's 3 different valuations that, you know, by and large, a city has to care about. The one on the far left is your full valuation before any rollback is applied to property. You may recall, I guess it's been 5 or 6 years ago now, that there was changes in the way that commercial and industrial property was taxed. It used to be at 100% of the assessed valuation. It's now at 90%. Residential property is not taxed at the full assessed value of that home. It's taxed at about 55%. Ag property, which doesn't have a lot of applicability to the city, is at about 55% of their assessed valuation as well. But the full value, the one on the far left for debt limit, I will call actual valuation. You take that top number, which is just shy of 1.3 billion times your 5%, and that is what is used to calculate your debt limit. So then when we talk about being at 70% of that number, you'll see that on the table down below. The operating budget then is shown in the next column over, 724 million. So for your operating budget, so this is what you set your general fund levies with. That is based on your valuation, not including the TIF, or the tax increment financing area. The column on the far right then does include the TIF. That's used for your debt service levy. And so you can see historical growth rates. Your actual valuation's just shy of 2% at 1.98. Your general fund budget at 2.07, and your debt levy at 2.56. So that's been the 10-year growth rate in those different valuation metrics. They don't move at the same rate, primarily because your tax increment financing area had been growing faster than your regular valuation. And you know, the impact between those is also the rollback percentage changes. So overall, it's more or less just what have you seen in the past. You know, the primary limit, you know, when the city was going through what I'd call some of your more financial constraints, is where you see those years in the operating budget where you had valuations at 1.3, 1.1, 0.62, 0.73%. So that's hard when your valuation is growing at those low levels and you know the cost of living and your expenses are growing at higher levels. So that's why there's been a lot of talk over the last 5 years about, you know, reining in the operating budget and being as efficient as possible. Reverse that trend over the last couple of years, you've seen some better valuation growth. So that's, you know, obviously a good thing, but you know, it's never guaranteed what the next year's valuation growth looks like. So the table down below then does illustrate your debt limit. You see in the far left column your outstanding debt And then the retired, it says retired GO, stands for general obligation, how your principal repayment occurs over the next 13 years on the current debt structure. So you see, after you make your regular payments this June, you'll have about $34 million of debt outstanding. Based on your current valuation, the $1.292 billion, your debt limit is at $64.6 million, leaving you with a remaining debt limit of 30.6, or at 52.6% utilization. So that's after your June payments, and that would be assuming that the city did not enter into what you're planning on funding for your current capital improvement plan. So you're gonna see that on the next page, sorry, one more page after that. So the next page then deals with what I'll call your financial profile from debt outstanding. Now you saw that total principal payment, the retirement for your debt limit on the prior page. This page also brings on your total interest and then your total P&I, or total principal and interest, or total payments. So you can see those by fiscal year moving out. If you move over then to the table on the right, you see your total payments, and then you see a column that says less abatement. Abatement simply means that you're using other resources besides the debt service levy. So in the case of your city, you utilize some local option sales tax revenues, some sewer revenues, and then you also have the largest component is tax increment financing revenues. That goes in that abatement column that offsets your existing debt. So then the net principal and interest is what's remaining for the property tax or debt service levy. You see the levy rates off to the right there. Again, that's assuming no additional debt. One of the things we've been working through, you see that kind of blue line there, is that the city's been dealing with a little bit what I'll call kind of a plateau. So you see your debt levy is slightly elevated until you get past 2022. And then you kind of see a normal progression that we'd like to see for a city, where your debt levy doesn't stay at 3 and then drop down to 2. It stair steps down incremental levels each year. So once we work through that 2022 bubble, that'll give the city a little bit more flexibility on how you structure debt, meaning you could pay it off more quickly, pay less interest over time, as well as look at the option of lowering your debt service levy. So you'll see that a couple pages later about how we forecast that you'll be able to drop your debt service levy by approximately 40 cents right now. So the following page then does give you that illustration of the other resources committed to debt. So you see that those total that $23.7 million.
Man, I just had a quick flashback. I remember the first time I met you. This meeting is going so much better than it was.
Oh,
back in
yes.
the day.
Let's see, that meeting occurred, that was in 2012. What was it?
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
2012.
So this was on the heels of the rating agency informing you that your rating was not going to be able to remain where it was. And so then if you think of that journey that we've had, Mr. Mayor, it's been a long one, but it's been good. You
It's
guys
been
have,
something, man. It's been
you guys have had to make a lot of tough decisions here, so, and it's paid off. You guys recently, I guess, was it last year or the year before, on the rating bump that you got from Standard & Poor's?
I think it's the year before.
The year before, where the city essentially got what I'd call a two-notch upgrade on your rating, which was really a nice nod to the fact of the financial progress you guys have made. And then here you are 6 years later, and you guys have reached those financial goals that you had set back at that time.
Say that again, the Hawkeye guy sitting over there. I just want to make sure he hears that. You caught that, didn't you?
I think you
Okay.
got it. He was probably good. So this does give you kind of the lay of the land for where your other resources come from for paying debt. So switching to the next section, we're just going to high-level hit what we anticipate will be your upcoming issue. And I'm going to hit, there's a lot of numbers on this page. I'm not going to pretend that there's not. But as we look at your upcoming debt issue, I have broken that out from the standpoint of your total payments at $8.3 million. the estimated interest rates, and then you can see as we kind of transition forward, where your levy rate will be right around that 380 again this year. We'll live within the 379. We won't bump you up a penny. But as you kind of work left to right, what I'm showing you is total payments when you get to that column 5. And then you're planning to utilize, at this point, tax increment financing dollars of about $400,000 per year. Some of the sales tax increment that was originally forecasted, about $2.5 million total. And then you see your net debt service levy for the current issue, your existing debt, and then how that combines. Now, the thing you'll note is, as you look at the no growth levy, you see at the 380, 350, 335, the city's committed to keeping that within your $3.80 for the next couple years, and then looking at dropping that in the future. So you'll see that a few pages later. Again, as we kind of look at the funding sources, the projects identified, there's some street resurfacing and upgrade. Those will be paid for with the levy. There's the flood wall project that was, part of the funding was taken care of last year. This is the second component of funding for that initial project on the flood wall. And then Mount Pleasant Street Bridge is the component that is being targeted to pay for with tax increment financing revenues.
And Central Avenue.
Yeah, sorry, and Central Avenue Bridge, excuse me. The next page just provides some more detail. I'm not going to bore you with that. This is the prove your math exercise that you may get tired of with our firm, but sometimes more information is better, sometimes less is better. So you'll have to take my commentary as the less, but this kind of gives you the breakout of that funding mechanism. Now, as we move to section 3, this is where, the numbers on this sheet are just tiny. So I would encourage you not to even really to look at those and just kind of listen to my commentary here. So what we've set up here is the ability to illustrate the planning in your next 5 years, and then the debt structure for the next 6 or 7 years out. And the reason we're looking at this is just trying to forecast future levy rates. Now, if I did a 5-year CIP plan and only looked at the 5 years, I would be telling you that you're going to have to keep your debt service levy at $3.80. That's not much good news overall. But as you kind of get through, remember that blue line that showed the 2022 year, I think it's important for you guys to kind of see the big picture that, there is some relief coming on the way
Relief is coming.
for the debt service component. Now, obviously, the operating budget is another animal that, I'll give some overall commentary later, but, the thing that you can see here is that, if you can see it, is that, overall, you're gonna fund your capital improvement plan, very conservatively. And the nice thing as you get in those out years is that we're looking at transitioning the city to a shorter term of debt. So away from 15-year debt onto 10-year debt.
Yes.
Which is also a positive. So on top of shortening your debt structure, you're gonna be able to do that and drop the levy rate at the same time. So a lot of this was talked about. There was a lot of pain that was felt, when the initial kind of, you haven't been funding what you needed to in the past. So it's gonna be some short-term pain, and you're working through that. But there's light at the end of the tunnel. We see the potential for a 40-cent drop on the debt service levy in 2023, and then another 40 cents down in 2028. And then depending on the level of debt thereafter, it's reasonable to think that there could be some room for that to go down even further. But I hate to make promises when we're talking already 10 years out, but I can say if you look at these kind of normal levels of funding for just your street program, looks like about an 80-cent drop by the time you get out to year 10.
Well, as a city, we're planning on staying in business long-term, so
Yep.
we like those long-term goals too.
Yes, correct. So
I guess the big project that this throws in, still funding, the potential to have that Cascade Bridge type number, whether that's something that the council at the time is gonna wanna do or how they're
Yeah.
gonna wanna approach that issue, but you do have the flexibility out there in about 2024 to be able to have
This-
that as a potential project to fund.
This includes that?
that
Yes.
does
Yeah.
include Cascade
Okay.
Bridge, so if you can read, so Mainly, it's just street program 23 to 29, and then Cascade Bridge is thrown in there in 2024.
Yes, sir.
So, obviously, some decisions down the road, but this just kind of gives you a high-level overview. You'll get used to seeing this for the new council members. You'll see this every year, and maybe more frequently. Typically, we've done fall sessions too, where, okay, outside of the budget now, let's just talk about what's possible. But now you've kind of narrowed in your 5-year CIP. This is kind of where we've stuck the numbers. All right. Any other questions before moving on? Okay. The next section then deals with your existing tax increment financing obligations. So you're going to see total payments in the far left, and that represents the debt portion. There's another function of, I'll call debt within your tax increment financing area that's considered rebates. Now, the thing I'll say on the rebates is they are estimates. So the way a tax increment financing rebate works is that you have certain contracts with companies to rebate a portion of the property taxes that they pay. So some of those are 100% for 5 years, and then 50% for the next 5, and then you're done after 10 years. And they're subject to a maximum amount in every case. So these are just estimates on current valuation. Even if you don't enter into any additional rebate obligations with any industries, that rebate obligation number will likely increase as they add value to kind of fill up their end of the bargain on creating the valuation that they said they're going to create with their new developments. So you have three rebates outstanding right now. So that gives you the total obligation, and then what we've done with your tax increment financing income is just given an illustration if you kept that constant with what you claimed for the current year, which is at $2.45 million. So one thing you'll note here is that you're utilizing about 90% of your tax increment financing dollars this year of what was claimed. You can see a surplus generating over time. Now, the thing I'll caution you there is that you can't generate a surplus in the TIF. The reason that you can have a balance there is because you have other obligations outstanding that are greater than the current balance. For example, your current balance is $278,000 at the beginning of this fiscal year. You can have that balance outstanding because your total certified payments are roughly $12.4 million on debt. So technically, you could have $12.4 million of cash on hand, but then you would take that cash and pay off your debt. So that's the function there. So don't think of these as dollars. It's not a blank check, per se. But it does give you an ability to kind of target a current amount of resources without claiming any additional valuation growth in your tax increment financing area. So this is the option where you might be able to say, we looked at the disparaging, valuation growth, where we had your general fund growing or your budget valuation growing at 1 and your debt service budget growing at 1. You could begin what we'll call releasing the regular valuation back into the general budget for all taxing entities, which includes, the school district, the county, and as well as the city's operating budget, which will then allow, hopefully, you to have a little bit of general fund relief. That being said, if you have another year of smaller valuation growth in the 1% range, you might have to do that to just alleviate pressures in your general fund. So hopefully you get another nice year of valuation growth, and you have the ability to kind of cap off on some of your TIF income to kind of allow you to move forward. Now, I'm going to give you an illustration a couple pages later that just kind of deal with, and I'll caution you to not get too tied up on the project names, but the ability to continue to fund a lot of your CIP program future with some of these resources available.
And what we've done as we set this up, he's showing TIF income, that $2,450,000. That's about $75 million worth of value that being held in the TIF account to cover TIF projects existing and potential new ones coming on, releasing any valuation above that on an annual basis back to the underlying entities. We've been able to do that last year, for the current fiscal year that we're in, for the proposed that we're in the process of trying to get adopted, and then into the out years. The TIF rebates, that valuation is actually on top of the 75 million, so we're holding, I think it's like
84.
84 million. But those are fixed towards their own separate pot of things that they are committed to.
Correct. All right, so same format, really tiny numbers, but the same type of mentality with looking at future projects. Now, again, we've thrown out some improvement projects here, but, you know, ultimately, the message would be, you would have the ability to fund over the next, let's call it 9 years, about $22 million of additional infrastructure projects out of your tax increment financing fund, again, without changing your levy structure, without changing or increasing the amount of tax increment financing revenues that you're
Still.
claiming. And that would be, again, looking to kind of pay those off as quickly as possible, so that you're not paying a lot of interest, getting kind of more bang for your buck. You know, a couple of the things we have in there, you know, just, we have signals on the Recplex Road, a roundabout, potential parking ramp, stuff at the Recplex, Washington Street improvements, depot improvements, building repairs, Jefferson Street, industrial park expansion, and potentially some money towards the flood wall. So those are just kind of some initial,
We threw those out just as things that are potential needs within the community. They're not the things that you necessarily have any concrete thing behind them to actually do, but just to say, what if, can we really fund some of these different types of projects? But they are, as much as anything, placeholders and designed to get you to be thinking about what you potentially can be doing in the future.
and the other thing I'll just, one more
Yeah.
comment and I'll let you ask a question, is that, you know, in this is that we also have a $20 million release on top of this, back to the general evaluation after this 20-year planning period that's kind of set out here. So, again, kind of long-term picture, you know, I think you can move down. Certainly, you could be, you know, less aggressive in paying off this debt and maybe let some more of the 75 million go earlier. So we'll be kind of modeling that over the next couple of years, just as we start to get a more realistic picture of what things might be on your 5 and 10-year plan. So, Go ahead.
And TIF, to some extent, is similar to our general obligation bonds. It had debt that was backloaded to, maybe not to the same extent, but it was backloaded to that 22 timeframe. So
Ye-
some of that, some of these are issues that we do have more flexibility as we get beyond that.
Correct, yep. Sorry, your question.
Yeah, so my question relates to the TIF bond rating. How does releasing of TIF affect the bond rating? Is it positive? Is it negative? Does it have no effect at all?
With the bond rating,
Yes.
it does not have an impact
Okay.
in terms of the overall levy. Now, does it cascade and have a water flow effect down to your operating budget? And the answer would be yes, it does. So being able to release more TIF sooner would allow you to add some dollars within your existing levy structure to your operating budget. Now, the other trade-off could that be is that if you release that, you could also look at if we are all able to hold our operating budget as maybe dropping the levy rate down as well. So there can be a twofold improvement there. And it doesn't have to be either or, you can do some of both. In terms of the way that the rating agency looks at that, the only concern that they would have with for cities that would have large tax increment financing areas, you know, bigger than yours as a percentage of your overall budget, that would typically mean that they would have a lot of debt outstanding. So a city with a higher concentration of TIF to their overall valuation would, by definition, have a higher debt burden. That would be the only impact that you would see with the rating agency. Is the potential of, if you continue to, you know, leverage the TIF and maybe, you know, were to increase what I have on this sheet, that would be a lot of additional debt that might throw that ratio, because one of their ratios is total debt to valuation. So that would maybe skew that out. I think locking that in place helps you to avoid that situation where your debt profile becomes overly burdened and elevated.
Okay, thank you.
Very good, it's a very good question. The next section deals with sewer revenue obligations and planning. So this is kind of the, I'll call it the ugly stepchild in the room from the standpoint of this.
Got that right.
This is just nothing, there's nothing fun about this. There's nothing fun about talking about this. Because you guys really don't have any control over how you phase this in, how you implement it, how you pay for it. It's just, kind of is what it is. So we better talk about it. The kind of the proverbial elephant in the room. Now, something that the city has done very well is manage your operating cost within the budget. You've been paying off debt. You've been accumulating cash on hand to be able to plug into resources. And you've implemented some of the rate increases needed to kind of get yourself, at least on a playing field that allows you to have reasonable rate increases with respect to the overall plan. Now, this is your existing debt structure. There's nothing really, that telling about here. Your annual debt payments are about $1.5 million per year. You see that in the bottom table. It says P&I total. Sewer revenues for debt service is just, essentially it's a net income number where you add back your interest, depreciation cost, et cetera. 3.48 million is that number. You have a Build America bond credit right now. That's additional income that you receive. As we look at your debt coverage ratio, it's at about 2.35, which is very strong. Going into your upcoming planning, you'll see that those ratios do deteriorate relatively quickly. Just from the standpoint of the debt burden that's going to be required for you to comply with your CSO and your nitrate levels and stuff going forward. I have attempted to model out projects then on the following page. And these are, again, just real high level. We've looked at 20-year level debt structures. We are, in this case, picking up, there you go. And the summary will be on the next page. So this just shows you it's 20-year level debt. You're seeing principal payments, but the total annual payments are equal annual principal and interest.
And part of what Travis has done here, what he's modeling is when H.R. Green did the MAS, Market Angular South, when they did the facility plan for that, the tentative, that had the $80 million worth of, $85 million worth of work that needed to be done, 90. And it had a tentative time schedule to do it. Travis has taken those numbers and modeled what it would take to fund the work that was in that facility plan, absent looking at any of our other CIP needs that the system has. And then you can go and look at what that does to what we'd have to do in order to cover.
Yeah, so the takeaway here is we're looking at debt to be issued over the next 20 years. So this is really zoomed out. So when you look at these high levels, there is, inflation factors put into this as well. But about $116 million of debt to comply with your regulations.
The engineering fees on it.
Yeah, all that stuff's included.
Yep.
As we kind of look at your debt structure, then on the following page, you're going to see on the left side your existing debt obligations. It says existing revenues. That means, sorry, that should say existing revenue. It's existing revenue debt. And then you see existing GO. So that's the portion that you are using some sewer revenues to pay back one of your existing bond, or two of your existing bond issues. And then you see the new revenue debt, and that's total principal and interest illustrated there. You see your combined obligations. And then you see just some inputs into our funding model. So we thought we're looking at a couple different buckets for inflation over time. And I just chose 3%. as, personnel, contractual, operating budget, and your capital, and your ongoing capital needs, and inflated those at 3%. In order to get your debt structure close to compliance, would be looking at about 4.5% increases over the next 5 years. So in other words, you're outpacing inflation by 1.5%. So if inflation was 0, then you need a 1.5% increase, which doesn't sound bad. Or if inflation is pegged at closer to, let's say 1.5% to 2%, you might be able to come off of the 4.5%. So what we're looking at mainly is outpacing inflation by 1.5% on your rate increase over the next 5 years. So there is obviously some room for adjustment. The cause for, the only cause for concern that you would have, if you look over on the right, kind of what I'll call the feedback from the model, your coverage ratios for some of your existing debt require you to be above 1.25%. So that means you need to have $1.25 of revenue available for debt service for every dollar that goes out for debt service payments. Under the SRF program, that ratio is typically 1.1. So as we kind of look at, paying off some of your conventional debt and perhaps converting those to some more favorable bond covenants, we may be able to kind of live within that. So the only cause for concerns are the orange numbers, which drop you below 110. I'm not as concerned right now about the yellow numbers, the yellow shaded numbers, because I think by the time we get out to 2026, we'll likely have been able to convert some of your existing debt to what we'll call either bank loans or something with more favorable covenants. The other thing you do see here is I have not touched deploying some of your cumulative unreserved cash. So that will serve as a buffer to lower some of your bonded indebtedness amounts. I didn't plug that in there yet. So you're not going to carry that much cash and borrow that much money. You'll find a number that fits within your operating budget, meets your policy targets, and then deploy somewhere in the neighborhood of $7 to $15 million of cash over the next 15 years towards these projects. So it's not as bad, and that's why I'm not as concerned about those numbers in yellow. And some of those ones in orange are probably more of just a timing issue. You can see that the bumps last for 1 year in one case and 4 years in the other. So I'm fairly confident that if you can keep pace with inflation on your rates, along with 5 years of outpacing inflation by 1.5%, you'll be able to fund these within kind of your targets for meeting debt. So,
That being said, our goal is not to have the rates go up 4.5% a year.
Right.
But that's gonna be, to some extent, what can we work out with DNR?
correct.
This is based on the idea of that we're taking our existing tentative plan, getting them to extend our time frame to do that by 15 years, and it still puts us in a spot where we're looking at 4.5% rate increases, and we're not,
Even with the extension?
even with a 15-year extension, and we're still not dealing with our other system needs.
It's assault.
This is something that we have serious concerns about, and we'll be working on over the course of the next year to try to get them to be amenable to a different type of schedule. But you gotta know that this is something that's on the backdrop that we could be looking at, depending on where DNR ultimately goes with this.
Am I reading this right? It's a 40% increase over the next 10 years?
Yeah, 4.5% for the first 5 annual, and then 3% annually.
Dude, they're not playing, man.
Yeah. Yeah, so, but those numbers would be caveated if you saw inflation 1% lower.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, still 30 over 10 years.
But the other concern that you can throw in here, this is talking about these numbers being financed with SRF financing at 2%. And since the SRF rates were dropped down to where it was effective 2% rate, we've had about 1% total increase in an interest rate environment. At some point, the state may see those numbers go back up another 0.5% or 1% to make up for that. When that happens,
Then our rates go up.
then our, yeah.
Yeah. Correct. Should have led with that. That was just kind of thinking through that, or maybe stuck it in the middle.
You work on your presentation, man.
No, I like to put
He
the
likes
negative.
Jim made me do it. Jim made me do it.
He
Let's go
loves
with
that
that.
stuff, man.
No,
Right at the end.
you know, the good news is you guys are planning ahead. It's a lot to kind of take in, but you're gonna bite it off, one bite at a time. Fund the project, look at it, kind of cast the vision, kind of know what's ahead. I can run all these models just, changing all your inflation stuff by 2%. It'll make you feel a little bit better, but, it's only on paper. So, all of these scenarios are on paper. So, each year, we'll look at it again. The message right now is, continue to keep that free cash flow. Jim alluded to the fact this doesn't have a lot of other capital programming in here. But you're meeting the rate structure here, so if you deployed another $15 million of capital out of your cash for those other projects, I still think you're okay. Again, deal with it as we get there. Kind of look at it each year as numbers get updated. These are things that we'll probably be, I'd say, looking at maybe twice a year as we get information. This will be just one thing to kind of keep in mind.
As we're doing the sewer master plan and modeling the projects that we've already identified to do over the next 5 years, and then looking at what can we build in for some of the larger things that we haven't identified, like the nitrate phosphate reduction requirements that might be coming up at the plant, or lift station requirements. We've built within a rate structure that you have the ability to cover about $3.5 million annually of projects that are funded this way, whether it's towards the sewer separation work or those other ones. And I think our biggest goal is to see what we can do to modify the facility plan we have for the CSO work, trying to see if we can't reduce those costs, incorporate some of those other things, and get DNR to work with us on the idea of seeing about $3.5 million annually going towards those projects with that 3% rate structure. But they need to see the environment that we're asking for before they can accept it.
Yeah.
I guess one of my biggest concerns looking at this is we're looking at, 4.5%, 3% increases, essentially for 30, 40, 50 years. And that doesn't take into any consideration any other improvements to the system. So whether it's residential expansion, industrial expansion, there's nothing in there.
Those need to be built in, and
To this-
that's where we're trying to work with DNR to give us,
Yeah.
as we put together a system that allows us to identify about that level of funding on an ongoing basis over the next, and
Yeah.
I think we've been talking about the idea that to get this really truly accomplished and get the other things that need done, it's more a 40 or 50 year time frame to get this
I don't see how the DNR could say no to it. I know they
Yeah,
can
they
say
can.
no, but I just can't see how they can't. They're closing towns down. I can't see how they will not. I just can't see how
the
they will
DNR
work
gets
with
to
us
be the
on
bearer
this.
of bad news from the federal regulations as part of the issue.
This is all coming down from the EPA, isn't
Yes.
it? Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And then there's this, I think there's some additional risks for the state of Iowa with respect to what happens down in the Mississippi River Basin, where we call. There's a lot of studies going on there, so I don't see a lot of leniency coming down from the EPA with that work. Now, the thing that you did make a comment about 30, 40 years, I'll try to stay above the blue line for now on that,
Sure.
because as you'll note below the blue line, you generate about $90 million of surplus cash.
Mm-hmm.
So some of that will be what's the next phase of improvements look like. So I would say there's a good chance you'll be able to back off those increases if the work slows down. Keep this in mind, you're funding $116 million of projects over the next 10 years. So if you have to fund the same amount over the next 20 years after that, then yeah, 3% rate increases appear to be the norm. The good news is that gives you the ability to take on a sizable amount of debt as you get out there. At the end of the day, the hope is that you start looking at, there'll be some years where you don't have to adjust for the inflationary impact.
But not for a while.
not for a while. Not until you get basically not until you get the majority of these projects bid out. And then you'll be able to look at it again. So, I would set your sight on inflationary increases plus a little bit. If you wanted to make the a little bit softer, inflationary plus 1% over the next 10 years probably gets you to where you need to be too, or 7 years instead of doing 1.5 over. But something plus inflation is likely what you're going to need.
Right, okay.
So overall, it's mainly good news until you get to the elephant in the room. But you guys are in a great situation because there's a lot of communities that are staring down these type of regulations that are smaller and are staring at 60% rate increases over the next 5 years. So figure out how you increase your rates 60% over 5 years. So 12.5% each year for 5 years. You guys are not in that scenario, but yet there's still some sympathy from the standpoint that you guys have come through some financial difficulties. So getting to where, we can get, maybe instead of looking at that big 40-cent drop, maybe we can start taking down the debt service levy, 5 cents each year over the next couple of years. I think that's probably doable. You're not going to be able to take 10% each year over the next 4 years, but maybe 5 cents, the ability to start dropping that a little bit kind of as a trade-off for where you're at. The other thing to just keep looking at is, where can you be efficient in your operating budget? There's going to be, obviously you guys have had some nice grant funding on some of your police and fire stuff, and so just paying attention to how that rolls off and what you have to do with respect to your budget there. So.
Do you want to look at that one?
Yeah, we can take a look at it. Now, the first thing I'd have to say is that, as I look at your overall budget and where it was years ago, you went from having no cash to a very solid amount of cash. Now, those seem like nominally big numbers. You finished with about $2.8 million in the general fund, which is in the neighborhood of 15% of your operating budget, which, because of, while 2.8 million is a nominal high number, for a budget your size, it's, go ahead, were you gonna add something?
I just want to put a frame reference here, because you can't see what's on the sheet, but the council has received this sheet already a couple of meetings back. The highlighted numbers in yellow are the net gain or loss for each year. The first one, the 49,000, is the current budget year that we're looking at, fiscal year 2019. The next are the 4 outlying years based on our existing staffing in the general fund and just continuing base operations with what would be a typical increase in associated revenues, loss of grant funds for the positions, increased costs for employees based off of our contracts and inflation.
So the numbers that you see obviously show up negative now. Part of that is, and the main driver there is a loss of grant funds. Grants have funded some positions within police and fire. So as those roll off, the assumption of the lack of a continuation of grant. So maybe there's other grants to seek after, but if they're not, then there's decisions to be made with respect to your budget. The only reason this is real relevant for our conversation tonight is that as we go out and lay out our timeline for the financing, we will be talking to one of the bond rating agencies about the overall direction of the operating budget. Obviously, if you present this picture, it doesn't present as rosy of a picture as you would hope. But I don't think anybody thinks that that is realistic, that you would just not have made any sort of adjustments along the way. The difficulty that your city manager has in those communications is just, what can you stand on with a backbone and say that here's what our expectations are. It's easy for him to say, well, yeah, we're gonna have a balanced budget because we're balanced this year, and then deal with the ramifications. But I think we would all recognize that that's not probably a realistic or a very honest presentation of expectations. However, this would be, I'd call kind of the worst case scenario of not adjusting staffing or revenues on that side. So,
However, as
Go
we
ahead.
go through this process, when we go through a ratings call, we do go through a 5-year pro forma on all of our funds, and at the end of the day, we send them our spreadsheet that shows the calculations that we've used to come to that. We do have to, we're in an environment where we have to be pretty honest and forthcoming about what's a realistic situation on the ground. And you can't be, if you look at what some other communities have had happen, you've seen communities go through a position where you've had people who have made a comment where they didn't talk about those deficits in the out years.
yeah. So the worst thing you would see is an expectation of this, and the next year you got to explain why the expectation didn't come true. And that loses you credibility with the rating agencies, which the city has done a great job of rebuilding credibility, where I'd say you lost it probably 5 or 6 years ago.
Actually, I'd say the worst case is if you're in a community, there's one in Pennsylvania that talked about their numbers and sort of glossed over some of the deficits that they were running and then didn't deal with things, and you saw people with federal charges come
Yeah.
against them.
Yeah.
And it's the environment when you go to the rating agencies has gotten to, this becomes essentially an investment issue where you have to disclose all information. And when we're talking about this, we need to be able to talk with them if we're going to be in a spot where we can go out and get a good rating for the existing bond issue that we're going to be looking to do this spring. Be able to talk about, we've identified a couple, we recognize where we're at with our existing staffing, but we're looking down the path of a couple of different alternatives for how we're going to deal with it.
Yeah.
It's very important that over the course of the next, we're going to have that call in mid-February.
Yeah,
That
maybe we can maybe push it out a little bit if we need to.
that we have identified that we have a council that recognizes this and is in the process of looking at a couple of different options for dealing with it and addressing it as we move forward. And that's going to be very important to be able to give them some framework that, yes, you acknowledge it, and you do have some realistic options to consider for how you're going to address this as we move through the next few years.
Yeah. And some of that can be coming back to that, the funding plan. We look at what the, taking $10 million out of that look like and converting that to regular valuation. What kind of revenue does that mean? That's probably an increase in revenue on your existing levy structure of about $100,000. Now, that doesn't solve the issue, but it buffers it a little bit. So, if there's some willingness to, change some of that, you're going to have some options there, but
But if we're
certainly
already-
the lack of grant funding can't be made up with just releasing all of your TIF at this point.
But if we're already behind on infrastructure improvements and keeping up with that, then that makes it even more difficult to consider releasing that TIF.
It does a little bit, yeah. So the problem, the other issue is I talked about, your debt service levy relief comes in fiscal '23. So, your issue comes in fiscal '23, but really hits pretty hard in '21. You can get by with 1 year down. It just means that, the work's not done, but you guys have made some great progress. So the downside is you don't exist in a community that's going to have 5 to 7% valuation growth, in which you can kind of grow your way into the grant funding. So that's one of the downsides you would have as opposed to another, let's say another city that's going to expect 7% valuation growth. You'll grow your way into being able to pay for some of those positions. At 2% valuation growth, you can grow your way into maybe one of them, but not all of them on the time frame that you'd like to see. So it just means more planning's to be done, and just be open and honest about this. I mean, as you guys sit in the ultimate tough position of trying to do a 5-year forecast and then essentially end up making political statements about what you might do 5 years from now. Which becomes difficult, but I think the message for the rating agency is that, we're willing to address, understanding what we need to do in fiscal '20 and what the maybe 3 options are that we're gonna have to do in '21, and the 3 options we might have to look at in 2022. And we're committed to getting there and maintaining our policy directives. Could you slide down a little bit on your fund balance and not face rating pressure? Yeah, you probably could.
But we don't want to.
But you don't, I mean, $620,000,
that's not viable.
that's ripe for a couple downgrades. But, can you absorb, dropping 150,000 one year if we go back up 100,000 the next year? Yeah,
Right.
certainly you can.
But if we downgrade in rating, then our bond price gets more expensive,
Correct.
right?
Right.
So
That's right.
at the end of the day, we're just setting ourselves up to be in worse shape than we were to start with.
Exactly, yep. That, you've circled the wagons and you got the big picture, so.
Wagons are circled.
That was a lot of information. It's kind of like drinking from a fire hose, so it's just, even if you've heard it a couple times, it's just going to take some time. So what I encourage you to do, I have contact information on the front. If at the end of the day you're by your bedside table rereading this at night before you fall asleep, and you come up with a great question, feel free to send it to Jim and myself, and we'll be as proactive as we can about getting you answers and options.
I think I'm gonna wake you up tonight, man. I've got a
Okay.
lot going on, so. maybe
Well, I don't keep my phone in my bedroom, so it won't wake me up.
That's all right. I'll let it keep ringing until you get to
I'll
it.
get it in the morning.
All right.
Might wake my dog up, and then maybe I
Well,
won't.
I don't wanna have any problems with your dogs.
So good. Jim, you got anything else?
What does the engagement letter do for us?
So the engagement letter just specifies the maximum fee that would come into for the underwriting. The way we've addressed that in the past is we look at our cost of financing, and then ultimately we set that against market expectations. So one of the things that we deal with in our industry is that we're highly regulated. So the fee that we can charge as an underwriter has to be in line with what's in the market. So this is not hey, we can charge whatever fee we want and move on. We are bound by fair dealing requirements with the city. So that includes interest rate in our fee structure. So then we'll communicate that as we go. This just sets the framework for the work that we'll do over the next 3 months to get you to your financing.
You guys good?
Okay,
Thank you.
Thanks, Travis.
all right, thank you
Thanks,
very much.
Travis. We're glad you made it
Thanks,
safe here
Travis.
from Eddyville or wherever you were.
That's where it was.
Do you sing? Anybody named Travis, don't they sing country music? You got the names? Okay, just checking.
Yeah, he'll make you cry and kick your dog too. All right. So are we good? Ready to move forward?
Yes.
Okay, number 3, Capitol Theater and Art Center, Tammy McCoy, come on down. Thanks again, Travis. Drive safe.
Thank you, Travis.
Good evening.
Sorry, make sure you gas up in Burlington, Travis. Make sure you gas up in Burlington. All right, okay.
Good evening, I'm Tammy McCoy, Executive Director of the Art Center of Burlington and the Capitol Theater of Burlington. Do you need my address?
No, you're good.
Okay. So it looks like we're starting with the Capitol Theater here, based on the picture there. And I want to start by saying, City of Burlington says it right there on the wall, great place to live, work, and play. And I want to say that without the Capitol Theater and the Art Center, I think it would take away from the living and the playing part significantly. So I have a piece of cake sitting there with several layers.
Looks good.
It looks yummy, doesn't it? Let's have a break.
Where's the samples?
That's what I'm saying.
Yes.
For the record, it's better next time you actually
Bring the cake and give you each a
what I'll
piece.
tell you.
What he said. Oh, what that guy said.
No, duly noted. If we could go to the next slide. A healthy city is like a layer cake. Each layer an important part of the whole. And I tried to think of everything. I may not have gotten everything in there, but kind of some of the layers that are included in a healthy city. And what I would like to propose is, the next slide, that the arts are not just the icing on the cake. They are an important layer. The U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis reports that the arts and culture sector represents 3.25% of the nation's gross domestic product, a larger share of the economy than tourism and agriculture. Arts and economic prosperity 4 is the American for the Arts fourth study of the nonprofit arts and culture industry's impact on the economy, the most comprehensive study of its kind ever conducted. It gives a quantifiable economic impact of nonprofit arts and culture organizations and their audiences. Using findings from 182 regions representing all 50 states and the District of Columbia, an input-output economic model is able to deliver national estimates. So some quick facts. Nationally, the arts industry generated $135.2 billion of economic activity. And I would like to add that $61.1 billion of the nation's nonprofit arts and culture organizations, in addition, so $61.1 billion of that is from nonprofit arts organizations. In addition to $4.1 billion in event-related expenditures by their audiences. Next slide. In 2010, nonprofit arts and culture organizations pumped an estimated $61.1 billion into the economy. Nonprofit arts and culture organizations are employers, producers, consumers, and key promoters of their cities and regions. Most of all, they are valuable contributors to the business community. Dinner and a show go hand in hand. Audiences of arts events generate income for local businesses, restaurants, parking, garages, hotels, retail stores. An average arts attendee spends $24.60 per event, not including the cost of their admission. On a national level, these audiences provided $74.1 billion of valuable revenue for local merchants and their communities. The sign of a great city is the strength of its cultural life. Our nonprofit arts groups are a powerful economic force and act as a magnet for tourism. Even more important, they help educate and inspire our citizens and stimulate creativity in the workplace and in our schools. I just started at the Capitol Theater, and so we are working on doing a whole revamp. The Capitol Theater started off with a major outstanding bills and was behind on their mortgage. I've been executive director for 2.5 months. We have all of the bills paid, and we have a plan to start a capital campaign to pay off the mortgage as well as renovate, to partner with SEC to add a performing arts center there.
Tammy McCoy.
Yes. So I also want to put in a kitchen and have a dinner theater at the Capitol Theater.
Tammy McCoy.
So I'm ambitious, and you know that from my history at the Arts Center, and I believe that Capitol Theater will be a major source of income to the city of Burlington and enhancing the lives and the playing of the people who live here. I don't believe that the Capitol Theater has currently, I know they don't currently receive money from the city, and I would like to ask that you would consider that because of the statistics that I just gave you, and I believe that we will be bringing people to our city. I have one thing in the works that I've been promised brings 90% of the people come from outside of Burlington. They come from Minneapolis and Kansas City and St. Louis to come to this particular event that I'm working on. So I would like you to consider adding the Capitol Theater as being funded, yes.
Tammy, is that a one-time event or an annual event?
Annual. Want to make it an annual blues and jazz festival.
Tammy McCoy.
Yes. So I do want to add to, well, we can go to the Arts Center pictures because I'm going to try and say everything at once. I just have some pictures of the Arts Center showing you what we've accomplished in just 4 short years. A community united by the ideas of compassion and creativity has incredible power. Art of all kinds, music, literature, traditional arts, visual arts can lift a community. The high concentration of arts in a city leads to higher civic engagement. Also, I want to say that Minneapolis recently reported that their creative industry generates 8 times more revenue than its sports. And I would like to just point out that currently the city gives a significant amount more money to sports than to the arts. We are getting about less than 3% of what's given to sports.
talk about, Willis?
Yes. So we are generating a lot of interest in Burlington. We're bringing people here, and I would just like to say that the arts should get a little bit bigger chunk of that money. We can move to just some slides or just some pictures here. We have classes for all ages. They're listed there on the side. We move to the next one. Paint It Forward. This is something we're doing with the community where we do a painting class, but we collaborate with another nonprofit like Great River Hospice or the American Liver Foundation. And proceeds from these classes are split 50-50. So part to the Art Center to keep us going and part to that organization. Artscapes is something else I am working very hard on. It's groups like Hope Haven and Goodwill, and even our assisted living centers, where we take art to these people and give them a outlet for creativity. I'm currently working with the hospital to try and get this program in the hospital with inpatient rehab. And so I am working on that, and they have very close to getting us in there to start doing that.
That'd be good.
Snake Alley Art Fair, it's a tradition over 50 years. We will be celebrating 51 years this summer. And it brings in thousands and thousands and thousands of people. Battle of the Brushes, Miracle on Jefferson Street, are two of the new things that we've brought in. Very popular events. Battle of the Brushes, we have a packed house every time. People love coming in and watching artists in action and painting, and it's fun, and it's a social event for Burlington. Miracle on Jefferson Street is something that we came up with to help families spend time together downtown on Jefferson Street. So I partner with other businesses downtown. We work together to try and provide an event or a memory-making time for families to do at Christmas with their kids. They get their family photo taken, they decorate sugar cookies, they make Christmas ornaments, they watch a Christmas movie, they hear stories, Christmas stories. There's a bunch of different things, and they do this by stopping at different businesses along the way. The arts are not a frill. The arts are a response to our individuality and our nature and help to shape our identity. What is there that can transcend deep difference and stubborn divisions? The arts. They have a wonderful universality. Art has the potential to unify, can speak in many languages without a translator. The arts do not discriminate. The arts can lift us up. Finally, I want to say that arts improve healthcare. Nearly 1/2 of the nation's healthcare institutions provide arts programming for their patients, families, and staff. 78% deliver these programs because of their healing benefits to patients, shorter hospital stays, better payment, and less medication. And this is what this Artscape
The arts have healing power.
That's right.
Better start painting.
Yeah, so you need to start painting more or doing some sculpture.
Could have been saving money on
I
doctor
think
bills,
maybe
Jimmy
during
McCoy.
city council, we should have a art and wine session.
Oh, hey, I'm for it. Bring it on.
So I would just like to appeal to you to please consider continuing to fund the Art Center, to consider funding the Capitol Theater, and if at all possible, making it a little more fair to how much that money is given to sports and how much is given to the arts.
Any questions for Tammy McCoy?
No, I would just go out there and say that, since you've taken over our, and now the Capitol Theater, I've seen a huge improvement in activities there, so congratulations.
Thank
That's
you.
a great job.
Thank you.
I'd agree. You and I have worked together on the Rotary Art Auction, and your organization has been vital with that. Just a shameless plug that's coming up here on March 8th. I look forward to working with you guys, and it's
Thank
been
you.
great to work with.
I'm looking forward to
Yeah.
seeing what you do after your after your good start in 2.5 months. I'm excited to see how you continue, but.
Thank you.
Yeah, keep up the good work you're doing.
Well,
Thank
there's
you.
just so much that, the Art Center has to offer that a lot of families don't realize. They, have the Friday night art hop that happens on the first and third Friday of the month, and, your kids go and get to do an art project, and you can either, go hang out at the gallery lounge for a little bit, or go run errands if you want.
Or go out to dinner.
Or go out to dinner downtown. I mean, there's just so many things that both the Art Center and the Capitol Theater offer that I think the whole community doesn't realize. You know, soon coming up is one of my favorite things is the Snake Alley Film Festival, which I ask off time from work for that.
It's gonna be awesome.
And it is. It's always a great time. And I didn't see a lot of attendance last year, but I always, you know, try to talk about it as much as I can to get as many people involved because it's a fun time. I mean, if you like watching films at all of any kind, you need to go. So, unless you don't like watching films, fine. You know, but most
Go to the
people
library and
do.
read a book.
Go to the, yeah, most people
Which
do.
is also a good activity. We also will be erecting a sculpture this spring that will celebrate all of the arts. So that will be a fun addition.
Timmy, on the theater, you guys are asking, I believe, for what, $20,000?
Yes,
The Capitol Theater.
yes.
For the Capitol Theater, it's
yes.
20,000? What specifically do you expect for those monies to go towards?
Well, I'll start with, when I started this job, October 30th of this year, I'm 17, not this year. It's not here yet, is it? I started with outstanding bills, an overdue outstanding bills of around $33,000. And about 2 months behind in our building payment and about 2 months behind in our property tax. Since then, we have our building payment and property tax current, and all $33,000 in bills are paid. That is because the community supports the Capitol Theater. The community supports the Art Center. The community is giving their money to make sure this happens. And so with this money that we're asking for, my next step is I am partnering with, like I said, STC to create this performing arts center where their students can learn and intern. And so this money will help go toward getting this almost $800,000 building and loan payments paid off, and also paying off the renovations and building a kitchen.
What has SCC contributed, or what have they committed to contribute for that program?
They have committed to working with us in the capital campaign and actually going out and trying to secure funds. We have a start date of early June for that capital campaign.
And you said that's 800,000?
We are going to try and raise 1.5 million
Okay.
to get the renovations done that we need to be done and to have the building completely paid off, which will make the banks very happy.
I love the idea of the dinner theater.
Thank
I think that's a phenomenal idea.
Yeah, it'll be something that will be a regular thing, either bi-monthly, you know, or something twice a month or once a week, depending on how popular it is. Yeah.
I have fond memories of going to Chicago to the dinner theater, and yes, tourists drop a lot of money when they're in another town attending the dinner theater. So I love the figures that bring 8 times more revenue than sports. I didn't know that, so I
Yes.
appreciate you sharing that.
Thank you. We're also working on bringing some more things to the theater that are for young children and for families of young children, so that I think that's an area, a demographic that we've missed. And so we're trying to increase what we offer to appeal to more people.
Timmy, a quick question you may not be able to answer, but do you know the number of attendees that have come to the Capitol Theater in the last 12 months that don't live in our community?
I'm sorry, I don't know that number.
Okay.
2.5 months into the job, I suppose.
Sure, that's why I figured it'd
Yeah,
probably be a tough
yeah.
ask. Do you know how many attendees have been to the Capitol Theater in the last 12 months? Do you have that information?
I'm sorry.
In the last 12, or in the last year, how many people attended the Capitol Theater for
The
one
Capitol.
show?
Oh,
He
you mean
didn't catch you say that you've only been 2.5 months in. He
Yeah.
must have
Yeah.
missed it.
Is that information,
I
did you
don't.
have it from the predecessor?
I don't have that
Okay.
information, no.
Are we good to go?
So, Jim, if we decided that this comes out of the hotel motel tax, if we decided to do something here, so we pay for somewhere else. Okay.
Yeah, I talked with, Ed was in earlier, I guess last fall, I don't know if it was October or so, and we had a little bit of discussion about where things were potentially gonna sit with this. And at the time, one of the things I mentioned with, I can't remember who came with you. I mentioned that the hotel motel was gonna be a tough area to, just based off of where our funding was and how it had declined from the previous year, that it was gonna be a tough area to get at. I did recommend that something that would be easier to have a consideration of, and it would match what's been done in the past. The capital campaign, when you get to that portion, we've used the economic development portion of funds out of local option sales tax towards projects comparable to that. And that's certainly something that could be considered, and there's actually some funds available as you get to that point for consideration. I did mention too, just for context, we do, even though it's not funded out of hotel motel tax, we do fund the arts through the auditorium. We put about close to $400,000 annually into that. So it's not as if the city doesn't fund a level of arts within the community. It's different than what you're looking at. It is part of that overall context. We do spend more money on rec programs through all of our other areas as well too. But just to put some context, it's not the only money that goes into that. That being said, going into this year with what we looked at within the hotel motel, we cut a significant amount of things out of what was already being funded, or had been previously committed to be funded out of the hotel motel tax, just based off of lower revenues and the commitment to the outdoor recplex and seeing that grow. We maintained the funding level for the Art Center, 12 that we've been funding over the last several years and kept it at that same level. But I couldn't figure out a way to add. I mean, we were already cutting things, so it didn't make sense to me at this point, just the timing, to add a new funding allocation to something. That being said, if you want to, you can. You are going to have to make a cut. You're correct.
What
Well,
would
you
be the
said-
timing on the economic development? When would that work?
I think that you would want to see where they have an official capital campaign underway,
Yeah.
and see what you're actually giving towards, and making a decision what you're willing to put towards that.
Is it a one-time ask, or are we talking about annual?
This was an annual ask, but
This is an annual ask. The capital campaign is a one-time.
So the 20,000 is for the capital campaign?
No,
Or
that's for-
20,000 for the annual ask?
I wasn't the one that asked for that, so I would defer to the person who asked. But basically, I'm asking that we have a annual support for the Capitol Theater as well as the Art Center, because these are two entities that give back to the community significantly. And yes, we would be interested in asking for something toward the capital campaign, because in order to have the Capitol Theater be able to be self-sustaining, it's going to have some of these things happen.
So I guess in the future, I would suggest that if we do consider an annual payment that matches what we can, that would make sense. From a one-time ask, I know that the discussion has occurred where we're going to use a percentage or a small amount of, or I'm sorry, a larger amount of funds out of the payment from Weingard towards the recplex. I know that was something that was discussed several weeks ago. Would it be appropriate to use a percentage of that for the one-time and perhaps not meet 100% of the ask, but a percentage of it?
you could consider that. But, I mean, you got to get to a point where you have the ask in front of you.
And that's,
And see where it
that's
fits
correct,
into the context.
but it's possible.
Mhm.
Okay.
I think I'd probably say that using the economic development funds.
Makes better sense.
At least for this year possibly, and then we can always revisit it.
As long as that's not at a cost of eliminating something else that is also economic development related.
So as far as economic development goes, the board would have to,
Yep.
and they're not scheduled to meet until March.
They can be as needed, but we don't have an official ask.
Right.
And
No, I get that.
The reason that we don't yet is I'm waiting for SEC to be ready to go, and they are going to be a significant part of this. We're going to be a team doing this ask together.
That's for the capital campaign.
Yes,
The
capital
annual
campaign.
ask is,
Yes,
we've had.
right.
Any other questions? Well, we're gonna deal with that. We gotta deal with the budget right
Okay.
afterwards, so.
Yeah.
You guys good?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tammy.
Okay, number 4,
Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, Anderson and Larkins.
Hello, thanks for having me. My name is Brad Barnes, CPA. And our office conducted the financial statement audit for fiscal year 17. So I'm just going to very briefly go over the results of that audit and let you guys ask questions as you'd like. Do you guys have the financial statements in front of you? Okay, good deal. I'm just going to refer to a couple page numbers if you'd like to follow along. Page 23 is your statement of net position, and here it describes your assets, liabilities, and net position.
Share with you.
Net position, just looking at the far right total column, 50.1 million compared to almost 46 million last year. Probably your biggest changes to note there is cash was up about 10 million, but also so was your liabilities. So it kind of, I think at the end of the fiscal year, you guys issued some debt, and that remained unspent at the end of the fiscal year. Page 24. This shows your revenues and expenses by function. So again, looking at the total right column, this is citywide, and you had revenues of 41 million compared to 42.7 million the previous fiscal year. Total expenses, 36.3 million compared to 34.7 million, having a total net increase of 4.6 million this year compared to 8.1 million for fiscal year 16. Now I'm just going to flip to page 153. This provides our basically the results of the audit. And to summarize, we provided what's called an unmodified opinion on the financial statements. And that's
What page did you say we were?
153. I'm
Okay.
sorry,
So that's all right.
I jumped quite a bit. Yeah. Last page. Second to
okay.
last page. We provide an unmodified opinion on the financial statements. In other words, that's a clean opinion on the audit. We did not have any audit adjustments, which speaks very highly of your finance team. They do a really good job. So, good team. Parts 2 and 3, we also look at internal control and compliance. And as noted here, we did not have any findings related to internal control or compliance. And the only thing else I was going to note is on the next page, 154, it's not really considered a finding, it's more of a disclosure item, but halfway down it talks about financial position. We talk about it more in detail on page 79 in note 9, but there were a few fund balances that did have deficit balances at the end of the fiscal year. So.
Well, I think that's plenty. Do you guys have any questions for Brad Barnes?
No, I don't.
No, that's
Thank you,
fine.
Brian.
Thank you.
Thanks for being so patient. We appreciate
Thanks,
that.
Brad.
No problem at all. Thank you.
Okay. You guys have any issues on appointments?
I
Peanut butter?
I'm good.
Okay.
Just for note, I already sit on the one.
You already, what's that?
I already sit on the one day, and
American music.
Oh, yeah, that's
So
right.
you appoint.
Yeah, but that's,
I haven't
No.
officially been appointed.
okay,
You have to appoint,
okay.
and that would still.
All right, nothing left but the budget. James? Jim?
What's this fifth district thing? I missed this. Fifth district recap, is that handed out tonight by you and stuff, or do I just have this from some other plan?
Toeslinger, put up the sheet.
We pretty much presented everything, but there's still some pieces that we just, that don't fall under anyone's responsibility, but are still part of our ongoing operations. Where property taxes are. If you look up on the sheet, comparison of property tax asking, we just kind of wanted to demonstrate that we're carrying forward the same levies into this next year that we had for the current year. You can see where, compared to FY17, we did 40% increase in the current year. That was to fund one fire person, one position, 2 police officers, and part-time nuisance inspector is what that was covering. And that 40-cent levy doesn't cover necessarily the full cost of that, but given where we were with from an operating perspective, that was what needed to be done to kind of make it whole for the shortfall that we had with other things. The back side of that sheet, when we do the state budget, levies break out. The state budget here towards the end of February and into March, when we do the adopted budget that you'll consider. This is the certification sheet for tax askings. The numbers again reflect the same as what was on the other side. Shows that the bottom right corner shows that same $16 increase with the different component units, the revenues that come from them. As you look through the list, this is there are all the different state authorized property tax askings or that you could potentially have. Not all of them do we qualify for. If you were to look at this, he has it right now. We do, the emergency levy has a cap, the 27 cents that we're allowed to do. The police and fire retirement and FICA, IPERS, and then other employee benefits, we can levy as necessary to cover the costs that we actually incur in the general fund. We do not cover the total costs there. Potentially, our true costs for those, I'm not exactly sure, but probably another $2 to $2.5 million.
Go back to the first page you put up is at the bottom of that. That's up here.
So there's another 3.7 million of employee benefits that we could tax theoretically. Now, we do cover a portion. When we talk about local option sales tax, 50% of that going for property tax relief, we've essentially said that we're going to, we look at that as being a portion of levying for property taxes here. So we have about a little over 2 million from local option, 2.1 million from local option sales tax that gets transferred over 50% of the projected revenues. So we wouldn't be raising taxes for that amount because we promised that we're keeping our levy down. But that still means there's another 1.6 million that we could levy to cover our employee benefits. So we do have flexibility to move rates around. I wouldn't want to have to raise property taxes enough to raise another $1.6 million annually. That's the tax limit that we have now is higher than what we think we should have in the community on a long-term basis. That 1.6 million would be in the neighborhood of $2.50 tax levy, somewhere in that. I think that's about right. Significantly would put us out of whack. That being said, this is designed to let you know that as you see the pieces of the document going through, we are levying the same amount that we did last year into this next year.
Okay.
We have three different funds that we never went through. We have the sheet that gives a definition of how TIF works, that you're invited to read at your leisure, and we're not gonna show it. We do have a breakdown then for budgeted amounts coming in for revenue. Then the transfers out, what our transfers are the annual debt payments on the existing projects that we funded, as well as the proposed, the borrowing that we're looking to do this spring. It has a TIF component for the Mount Pleasant Street bid. This has the anticipated purchase payment. And the next sheet on TIF recognizes the TIF rebates that we have in existence. We have a TIF rebate had ongoing payments on. I'm not sure, I don't think we have one yet for the Manor property, but that will be, not in 19, but then in fiscal 20, we'll start to see a rebate through that one that we'll start budgeting for. So just to recognize, even though there's an increment until then.
We don't see the revenue until then?
But we will be budgeting for revenue to come in and then be paid out to the entity based on that agreement.
I got you.
And you see that on the next sheet. GO bond payment that we make, general obligation debt payment, even if it's backed by TIF finances, TIF revenue, we make out of the debt service fund. That's one of the requirements that the state puts on us. We have to transfer money from the TIF fund to the.
Why is that?
They want to recognize that it's just a state report requirement. It's a general obligated debt. If it's a bond that theoretically could be paid for with property taxes, they want to recognize it in the debt service fund. You can bring money in from any fund that you want to and make all the payments out of that, but they want it identified clearly.
Yeah, all right.
It's the environment that's been there since I started 20-some years ago. It's been around for a while. We have several, with the targeted jobs, we have several projects that we have been eligible for new jobs over the last several years. I'm not going to get them all, so I better not name them off. I know Weingard case, Shears, Silgan, and there's at least one other one, the battery. Overall, between those are funds that we receive based off of, they, for the new jobs that are created, are able to, as an incentive, get their tax, what they have to pay to the state for taxes for employees, get it back to them, be reimbursed, but it has to flow through us, and then we have to monitor that they've met their employment targets. That's a whole lot of fun for our accounting department, but the chamber actually works pretty well with them, trying to help make sure that everything that they need to make this happen is successful. But it does go a lot of time to our accounting department to make it. But we got about $1.4 million that could potentially go through with those different targeted job projects. Now, that is, we don't really have much say over how much actually goes through there. As an example, Federal Mogul was well ahead of their targets. So they were receiving funds original projections were. And we just, and you may see an employer who ends up not collecting any, and for a period of time because they're not able to hit their targets that they were after. So we try to make sure that we have a number that looks to be able to hit what we anticipate being what we collect. And this is a pass-through. Debt service fund has been mentioned several times tonight. If you look in here, we have a, if you look at the difference between actual and 2017, your total revenues in 17 were 13 million, significantly higher than the 7 million that we have for this next year. But that was we refinanced one of our bond issues last year. And even though we didn't do anything new, refinancing, you have to reflect it in the book, so it magnifies our costs. That was to the tune of $7.5 million last year that we refinanced. But we have to make sure, again, that anything that goes through our books that we account for in the budget. $3 million, the rest is transfers. The two primary sources of transfers, the TIF funds, mentioned that all the TIF revenue that got collected and transferred out for debt payments for existing projects, and then the ones that are contemplated in this budget, they have to come over here. This year has from 8 years ago, somewhere in that neighborhood, that we pay for is they were financed with general obligation debt as opposed to being just backed by the sewer revenue. So for those two, the revenue comes in here and we make that inside here. The majority of this revenue is not backed by the full faith and credit of the city as a GO bond, but it's done strictly as a sewer revenue bond. It's only backed by the revenues collected from the system. Travis hit on legal. Travis hit on the legal debt margin, right around that 65% mark of what we're authorized to borrow, we have borrowed. And that is down from the 80%. It is up from last year's 56%. The primary driver that will have us coming up to the 70% threshold over the next few years is the flood wall project, depending on how we do go through phases there. Even if we get money back from the state, we still have to, we're doing that all as GO debt and it counts against our debt limit. So we have to be careful projects and make sure we fit it in.
A lot of that would be dictated by matching money, right?
Right now, yes. We're waiting to see what happens with funds coming in from the state as we try to figure out what's the right schedule for doing future projects there. We have it still built into the CIP on the original schedule. And then you have have a sheet that, this is off of one of Stephanie's Excel spreadsheets where she tracks all our various bonds that we still have outstanding. I think details on this are probably in the audit that was just submitted, but this is something that we have, that are all paid for out of the debt service fund. And the last sheet is where we stand right now in terms of what's been presented to you for the different. What's that? the summary of all funds.
Yeah, got it.
And this'll match how we end up having to report stuff on when it comes to the state budget forms to some extent. State budget forms are not funded. To break everything on the state budget form into the separate columns. One column is a general fund, then special revenue funds, then a debt service, trust and agency, capital projects, and enterprise funds. And that's not quite exactly how they go across the columns, but it's but you can look through what the beginning balances are by fund, what we budgeted for revenues in each of the different funds, transfers in between funds, expenditures and transfers out, and then what we're looking for an estimated ending balance in each area. That we track the balance, the actual balance on the closest is a general fund. The others, if we were to see it, we try not to ever budget to where we're going into a deficit on any of them, but we want to make sure that we're made sure that we can adequately cover everything, and we can, as presented. And you get a look here, we've got an overall budget that has budgeted expenditures of $66 million. Does that show up on the state forms as $78 million when you get the transfers out? So, yes. End up with a closer to an $80 million budget when it takes into account the transfers out for this upcoming year. And if you look at what our beginning fund balance is versus the estimated ending fund balance, it's gaining a couple million. And that is all in the capital projects, and really, that's an estimate. We're making some guesses as to when funds are going to arrive and when they're going to be spent. But all the capital projects are allocated and covered.
James?
And with that, I think, you know, as an example, I don't know that we've shown revenues and expenditures in our trust and agencies. But you'll get that before we get to the end of the budget. Trust and agencies, when it comes to those revenues and expenditures, we're not collecting. We're getting revenues. Make sure that we account for those, but they're not money that falls within our hands to make decisions about. With that, this is the time for you to think about, are you happy to take the budget as is? Do you want to see some changes?
I just want to say, James, this is probably some of your best work.
No, it's not.
I was just getting ready to say, James, this is horrible. No. No. Came through for me. I went through. I'm satisfied. I'm satisfied. I know that you guys were expecting me to come in with gloves on, but there's no sense in fighting if there's no need to fight, and I'm satisfied.
No, I think, you know, the balanced budget upcoming is fine, but I do think we're gonna have to look at that. We're gonna have to look at that. I mean, that's where our dilemma is gonna be in the coming years, when the SAFER grant runs out, and, you know, as much as I would like to have more staff, I think we're gonna have to wait and see. So I'm kind of tapping the brakes on that one a little bit, but that's not for this budget.
to see what's going to happen. I just don't feel like now's the time to get reckless. Senator?
I don't know, I think the easiest thing to do is you're right, just to prove it as is, it's been balanced. A couple of things that really stand out to me that I don't like. I don't like I think that's something that we need to look heavily into adjusting. The other thing I don't like is, the one presentation that really stands out to me was,
I will just point, your third highest on the sheet that I've given to you, that's the top 20 some communities.
Yeah.
In size, we're probably
like,
the others are all
like
smaller.
communities,
Yes.
we're the third highest.
Yes.
So if we look at who we are and what we do, I mean, that's kind of where I'm pulling that number from. The one presentation that really stood out to me was Chief Beard's. And I'm going to try and keep this microphone close because somebody told me that they couldn't hear me when I was talking in the past. But I think that we need to have come up with other sources of revenue. Jim, what are some of what's out there that we're not doing? We can't raise the rate. If we raise the rate, we're creating a disincentive for people to invest in our community, and we're just adding more costs. We're not helping ourselves, but also can't just hope there in 5 years.
Sure.
And this is something we need to talk about today. And when it comes back to the bond rating, like he said, those are things that they're going to look at, and they're going to want to know what's our plan. So just to act like it doesn't exist today, it's the easy answer. I get it. It's a balanced budget. It's what we asked for. Listen, it's balanced, but I'm really set on trying to do everything that we can to make sure that we are combating some of the criminal issues that we've seen. And we've got a request on the table for 2 officers from the police department. I don't think that that's probably feasible, but I'd like to see us shoot for at least 1 this year.
So from a funding perspective, one of the things that Chief Trexel had forwarded to me was before the bill got filed, but this last week a bill was filed, the Ground Emergency Medical Transport bill, and I don't have the House file number on that. I've emailed it to them. That's being considered up at the legislature, but that is a way to get some additional federal funds into the state and transferred to the agencies that are providing ground emergency medical transport, such as us. Your estimate on that was that you potentially need $300,000 to $400,000. Our ambulance department's bringing in just shy of 1.2, or right around 1.2 million. We're budgeted, I think, 1.3 million for next year. So up to $400,000 change in that number is a significant change to revenues for the ambulance department. I'm concerned that really truly is a pass-through as opposed to a new liability for the state. But that's a big bill for us to look at and consider as a way to provide additional funds to the city. That's, I lost track of what my second one was. The third major thing to look at, one that we considered a few years ago. I mean, if you're looking at what revenue sources are out there that are potential options from a revenue side.
What are you looking at to do?
Well, I'll go ahead and say it. The utility franchise fee is one that we don't use that is within the cost. We tried that a few years ago, and it failed by a small margin. I think that was 20% in favor, 80% against.
It got beat down pretty bad. It did.
So, I mean, and But that doesn't mean that it's not something that's a realistic thing to talk about. And really, if you look at what's going around the state, and the legislature allowed this for just recognizing that there need to be other alternatives other than just property tax to fund things.
So,
It's still another increase on the citizens.
Well, so just to touch on that, and I kind of knew the conversation was going to go this direction, so I did my due diligence. Try to come up with some information. You're right, there's 100 of those, 48 of them have a 5% franchise fee on residential and commercial. I did the math just on averages that I could come up with. And I really I want to know how it would impact an individual household in our community. So what I did was I took the average utility bill, which is just $300, and utilities about $180 a year, more than they do now for utility franchise fee. But one of the things that I started off saying was the importance of trying to get ourselves back in line on the property tax rate side of things. Like we said, we're the third highest among the top 20 communities. So using that rate back, and I did a bunch of math and basically come up with about $1.20 to $1.25 as the, for lack of a better term, equilibrium point to make that work. And I think that that's something that we can use as a means to an end to try and cover and make sure that we're not in a position to raise property tax rates for 3 years. And if we're going to try and cover where we're going to be in the future with the deficit, we have to talk about it now. If we wait, then there's a cost for waiting. Like I said, the easy thing to do is we can go ahead and approve this as it sits, but then next year we're going to be sitting here and saying, okay, we're going to raise taxes, or we're letting go 5 years. People in the last couple of weeks and try to determine where some of the temperature is with what their thought processes are, and most people will agree that services are extremely important, and we want to make sure that we're providing those services.
I disagree with you just a little bit, though.
But
citizens to take care of this. I mean, to me, that's the easy thing to do. So I just want to keep that in perspective.
Yeah.
We're still taking a fee.
Back to those numbers, the average household would end up paying about $90 more a year than they do today, based off my math. And I know that everybody's kind of got a different sense of opinion.
And I see both issues, because we did sit up here just a few months ago and say we will not raise anything. So I don't want to appear to be disingenuous, but the nice thing about a franchise fee, from what I understand, is it's an equitable fee and that everybody pays. Your businesses, your people, your churches, everybody. We're somehow going to have to fund them. So I think our challenge is to educate the constituents on what this is going to get them. It's going to get them the police officer. It's going to get them fast response to that 911 call. It's going to get them the nice roads and the bridges and the nice sidewalks and all these things that they want. Yes, specifically state what this is going to get, from what I understand, the state level. We can't just say this is just going to get stuff. We have to specifically say what it's going to get you and really sell people on it.
The other part of it is with the rate decrease, it puts us in a much better position to be competitive.
That's true and not true, though. Because I remember when the first feed industry coming here, the franchise fee. So it's true and not true. It is true that a franchise fee is more of a user tax. So if you're frugal at home and you're like me and your heat's on 60 and during the winter and 80 during the summer, you don't pay as much tax as maybe the industry or someone year round. property tax scale back, but you know, it is still, whatever you want to call it, it's still a tax. It is a user tax, though, so that's the only thing.
It's just one option. Remember,
Let
they
me-
wanted us to come up with
I
different
know.
I
options.
want
It's
to,
just
I
one
want to
option we're
interject here
kicking
real
around.
quick. Okay, so no franchise fee. Let's just pretend that. So how do we do that? We raise our taxable value. We have to create some pretty strict enforcement on these homes that people cannot necessarily take care of, or landlords cannot necessarily keep up to a high standard. So there's
There's a lot of variables.
right. There's so many variables. So how do we create do we crack down on this in a way that makes it, one, it's costly for us to do that, court fees and legal fees. And is that something that's popular? No, because that creates the city then becomes an enemy, a big enemy.
Well, I think when I said this is kind of one of those things where it means it's now provide the services, and we still have to do everything you're talking about. We have to come up with different plans in order to encourage growth, and we have to come up with a standard that we're going to enforce with regard to current housing stock in order to get our taxable base back to where it needs to be so that it can support the revenue or support the costs. Structure, all of those things are important and rely on the fact that housing valuations are keeping up with those costs. Right now, they're not. And when I say it means to an end, the goal is years from now, we can eliminate this. But I don't, you're right.
And again, I just want to remind everybody, I just want to throw this out there again. I just think we need to be very careful because
Yeah, I think it's something we ought to talk about, but it's not something I'm gonna say we gotta do today.
Oh, no.
You know,
No, just
we can
thinking
talk about
about
it
it.
over the course of the year and definitely take a look at it, because I think we have to uncover all stones. You know, one of the things that's frustrating for me going through this budget process is that and so, you know, we need to look at some of those formulas that we talked about. And, you know, that's why I asked about the airport today. You know, 75%. You know, sometimes, at some point in time, you know, everybody's got, and maybe they are chipping in fair, but those are things that we need to have discussions about. I think we discussed about the is this fair, is this equitable to them, but as well as to us. But I think it's, Matt, I think it's something that it definitely, it deserves a merited, long-term look and discussion, but I'm not gonna say tonight that we're gonna do it.
I'm not saying that we have to.
Well, you just said we had to.
Is
Terminology a
that
little
we
bit.
often say, let's talk about something, not
that's what we're
today,
talking
but tomorrow. So I think if we have, can we set a date? Maybe to appease whatever conflicting
No, I
versions
think we're
are
gonna kick it
happening.
around.
Right, because I hate it when we say, let's talk about this later. It's beyond anything that I can, you know, formulate an appropriate sentence for. If we're gonna talk about it, let's find a date tonight.
Okay, I'm fine with that. I'm just
That's
saying,
great.
I'm just saying
Yeah.
we can't vote, we can't
Often.
just,
Oh, no.
we can't just enact it anyway.
Absolutely not. There are many things we need to talk about.
But we
No,
we have to look at
absolutely.
all options.
There's a lot of other things that need to be thought through legally and things like that. But I think it's important that we need to start setting dates for things.
Yeah, and I came in here tonight to get my scissors out, and luckily Jen did that for me.
Yeah.
And then the speaker came in and the back down, and I think it behooves each each one of us to have this conversation, that it's gonna get ugly and it's gonna get dark
my gosh,
if we don't
is
start
it ever?
planning ahead.
This is gonna happen quick. I mean, we're
ever.
talking
It's-
5
yeah.
years out from running almost $1 million deficit, so.
Right. And that doesn't even have
Let
to
me
do
remind
with
people.
how we're,
The sky's not falling, though. As far as revenues, just be mindful again, how you're looking at how to bring and increase money that we're coming in. Because are we going to look at just throwing this on the people, or are we gonna look at other things too?
Oh, we're gonna look
Again,
at
I'm just saying, as we move forward, you're talking about you wanna have a conversation. Well, let's just not have a conversation on how to increase revenue. Not the conversation that we have. It's easy to accept the budget, but to me, it's easy to find other revenue to tax on the people, and it gets old to them. It gets old to them, and it's really frustrating, and it's getting tough to live, so
And it
that's
wasn't
not our
easy.
only option.
And it wasn't easy to do the budget because our department heads did their jobs and made cuts where they had to make made cuts where they had to make. So it wasn't easy, but there's a lot of work to make it come out balanced. So I'm okay with this one, but yes, we need to work on the next one because I don't want to wait until, wait a minute, we didn't pay attention, we're up against it. So I'm all right. I'm definitely all right with kicking it around. We just need to, whatever we do, we need to make sure that the citizens have proper input. And also give proper information.
Correct?
I'm just willing to look at alternate options. I don't want to say never, ever. I think
But I
we.
just want to deal with the franchise fee tonight, though, Mama. Are you three interested in the franchise fee? Because if you're not, if there's only two or one, then there's no sense in having a conversation. So,
yeah. There's no need to create panic.
Yeah,
but
there's no need to
talking
create
about-
panic. We're a new council and we want to educate ourselves on what our options are.
they'd like to explore the franchise fee.
Well, for a couple of things, I do have one recommended change on the CIP. Improvements at the Recplex off. That may be something that you still consider, but there's nothing identified and solid there, so there's not a reason to have it on
Well,
the CIP.
Okay.
Was the parking lot down at the BNSF parking lot, that's not
That's
on?
not
That's
guaranteed.
not-
Okay,
They
and
they
we're
haven't
not doing that.
I would like to leave that one on. We haven't. We get
all about it, but that's the third or fourth run in those buildings, so I don't want to get the cart before the horse on that one.
When's
Yeah,
that?
yeah, we
Yeah,
want,
that's too
they're,
close.
they're hoping to, I think their close date is maybe right, about the beginning of March, maybe either the beginning or end of March. And even at that, you may see them have,
Okay.
we know there's something there. We're trying to negotiate to see if it's possible to get a lease, and we've gotten the application in and
Yeah.
started
'Cause
that
That
process.
takes a
but-
long time. and
But we're not committing to, it doesn't make sense to commit to anything if there isn't a project moving forward. That is one change I would recommend. If you're forward with it, at the same time, as a separate discussion, if you're gonna talk about the franchise fee, it fits within the idea of what Travis brought up at the end of his talk about we need to be able to have some level of beginning discussions that we can have a framework for operating agencies for the next 2 weeks. With how we're dealing with the deficits that are 2 to 5 years out.
Yeah.
And start to say, well, these are so that we at least have a framework of these are the different avenues that we're looking at, one or the other, or one of these 3 avenues for how we're gonna deal with this over the next 5 years.
I'm interested in talking about it anyway, so.
I
That's
just-
an answer to your question.
I know the last couple of weeks I've done a ton of research to try and figure out what paths we have to get out of this. And that's one of the only paths that has a light at the end of the tunnel. The rest
So-
of it doesn't
so-
work.
We will have a discussion moving forward on how are we talking about our longer-term budget issues in the general fund.
Okay.
That would be great.
And that will include, if you want to have further
All kinds of
discussions
other-
on the
But did
franchise fee. that
did
would
we
be
get
one
a
of the things.
consensus for the, moving forward then?
Are you okay with the budget as is?
What did we decide on the capital? Nothing for this
It's-
next
They
budget?
haven't-
Donut.
They haven't made the official.
I don't have it in the budget. It's-
Yeah,
if
it's
you
not-
wanna
Okay,
add it,
we were gonna look at the other funding source for them then?
Yeah.
They
Does-
can make
Towards
a re-
economic development.
They
That's
can make
the
a
term.
request in the future, and there doesn't need to be a specified item on the budget. We budget. in the budget, uh, Sales tax budget, she showed economic development having, I think, 70,000 spent this next year.
Okay. I just think Tammy made a pretty powerful presentation, and I think that in the future, we don't want to leave them out. I think they're going to do some great things.
I think once they get to the point where they're at their asking place, then it's time to probably address that.
That's all I have, so.
Really, you don't have anything bad you want to say at the end? Here it
Oh,
comes.
wait a second, wait
Here
a second.
it comes.
Oh, wait, he's got
Wait
something.
for it.
I do have something. Chief, could you come forward for a second?
Uh-oh. You're in trouble.
Thank you, Mayor, I appreciate it.
You're fired. No.
That's what I'm
What
talking
did you
about.
do?
Well, I usually don't like to talk. I'll
He's
phrase this
he's
as-
too humble to say it, but he received a nice award. But I know he's gonna stammer up there because he's humble about it. But go ahead and talk about it.
for the city, so thank you.
Well deserved, my friend.
That's our chief.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. It's really the dedication and the hard work of everybody that's down at the department. And with that said, and I know you're talking about these staffing things and really, really tough decisions, and we get that. We're fiscally responsible to our organization. We understand. We can the staff level that we had, for the first time I've heard it in probably 5.5 years, the sergeant said, "Chief, I can't thank you enough. It was unbelievable to have 6 people working, and we could at least handle the calls. We could at least keep up with the calls." Now, that's not proactive policing, but that's progress. And it's important to me to share that with you. People that come and go from the organization, it's always extremely difficult for us to stay at any number. It's almost like we got to get to these numbers up here to maintain a number down here. And the reason for that is retention in law enforcement today is difficult. And then the replacement, it takes so long to get people up to speed. So keep that in
To get them in their own
mind.
vehicle.
To get them in their own car about 10, 11 months, but to really count on them, so to speak, that they're solid is that 2 to 3 years. I mean, in fairness. And so, and the timing of that is everything because of the academy and the way that's structured. I mean, they only hold 8 sessions really for us to for the 4-day college. So, in the academy, you're not going to even have a chance to get to an academy until April. And so you can kind of see, depending on when people come and go, the timing of that becomes difficult. So, and that really wasn't part of my presentation, but it's just a struggle for any police agency if we're certified, if you will, or budgeted at this number, to ever stay at that number. It can't be fair. Like you 6 months. But if the academy timing's right and you hire him, you got 6 months of an unbudgeted personnel, and we can't do that, you know, so. But anyway, thank you. I just really appreciate everything that you do for us, so thanks.
Yep.
Thank you, Chief.
Thanks for the snack, Linda.
I'm good. Jim brought up something good at the end of the meeting that was like,
Oh, my gosh,
I'm not
yeah.
sure.
I don't know what to do.
Everybody remember that.
Right, mark it on the calendar. So actually, this weekend is the South Hill Neighborhood Association banquet. That's on February 3rd. It's at 6 p.m. You know, that group has done some amazing things.
Yes,
and
they have.
It's just so important to, you know, if you're not involved with them or don't know what they're about, you know, you need to. They do some great things, and I think that without that association, I don't know how some of our would be. That is all from me.
Mr. Winker?
Nothing. I'm good.
Okay. Good, everybody. Thank you so much. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh.